Sir, you're charged with especially aggravated kidnapping. You're also charged with aggravated assault. And you're charged with theft of a firearm worth less than $2,500.
You're talking about stuff that is not
We will bring the jury.
Hello and welcome to the Court of Public Opinion. I am the Recovery Addict, and boy do I have a case for you today.
Why is the dog chewing on this guy?
I think they have got the wrong guy there.
Got the wrong guy. The dog was biting him.
He roughing him up quite a bit. There's a lawsuit.
9 out of 10 judges prefer watching the Recovery Addict live stream in their courtroom.
The fireworks are not done.
Now we're getting commentary on the case.
Literally not.
Dati mihi Anglican, please, service Latin. I didn't ask you to interrupt.
Is that correct?
Oh, for Trump's sake.
Good morning. Welcome to the Court of Public Opinion. I am the Recovery Addict. Good to have you all here this wonderful day. We've got a lot of court to watch today and some exciting things happening, so we'll get settled in here quick. Big shout out to Tumwater Troy, who's first in chat today. Tumwater Troy, the internet is all yours, my friend. For your promptness and punctuality, we're going to punish you. Everything IP-related worldwide is your responsibility. Congratulations, Troy. Great win for us. All right. Tons of stuff going on in the world of true crime. The Nancy Guthrie stuff. Show of hands, how many of you stayed up way too late following all the news? Oh my goodness. With an arrest and then a release, and it's just been wild. All right, yeah. I'm with you here, but we're going to get caught up here with court in just a minute. We just started just a second ago. I have to do a couple things first because legally, contractually, I'm required to do the things that are, appropriate.
Mike. What day is it, Mike? Guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Hump day! Welcome to Wednesday. That's all we've got time for. I'm sorry. We made it halfway through the work week, so it is hump day. Thank you. Let's see. We're not responsible for any hearing damage. Thank you, Greeners, for the waiver. Legal comes through on saves us on that one. All right, Josh has the birthdays. Let's get ready to sing the birthdays because we have to go to court here in just a second. Josh, or if you're ready, I am. So let's get that done. Let's see. Phoenix says it's my niece Jasmine's birthday today, so she's 10. Jasmine, happy birthday! Wish her a happy birthday, please. I sure will. So I'm going to add Jasmine to the list. But everyone, you're going to join with me and sing. We're going to sing to Jasmine, Pamela, and Wallflower. So on the count of 3, no, just kidding, we're going to have a music lead in. Everyone, stand up, deep breath, shoulders back, project your voice to the back of the room, blend your voice to the neighbor, and warm up to me, if you will. La 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 la. Okay, Jasmine, Pamela, and Wallflower. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jasmine, Pamela, and Wallflower. Happy birthday to you. All right, as the birthday song goes on, we're going to let everyone celebrate and have a good time. But we need to get to court, which has already started. We have closing arguments today in the Paul Caneiro trial, which is going to be just epic. I cannot wait for that. So, wait, don't tell me. What? We're waiting. Dancers are doing their thing. To everyone who celebrated their birthday today, happy birthday. I realize there are many wonderful days, but today is your special day. There are a million places you could have been and a million people you could have celebrated with, but you chose to be here with us. The privilege, pleasure, the honor, the joy is ours. Hopefully you can turn that joy back to you and make your day just a little more special. Or begin by helping yourself to free pancakes at Denny's, IHOP, Village Inn, Waffle House, McDonald's, Tammy Dunlap's House, Andy's Grill, Bob Evans, and Cracker Barrel. Fastest ever. All right. We'll let the dancers wrap up the song here. They've been practicing all morning for this one. And then we'll jump to closings, and you won't miss a word. Ish. Boom, 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 boom. 2-0. Tyler Fear. Drum solo for the big finish. Here we go. Now we go to court.
283, can I have the appearances of counsel for the record?
You look good. Prosecutor Nicole Wallace on behalf of the state.
Good morning, Judge Chris Decker, Assistant Monmouth County Prosecutor for the state.
Good morning. Monica Maskell on behalf of Mr. Paul Caneiro, who's present.
Good morning.
Good morning, Andy Murray, Mr. Caneiro.
All right, good morning. And good morning, Mr. Caneiro. All right, we are now ready to start the summations. With that, we go in reverse order. We will start with the defense. Go ahead.
Oh, they get one turn each.
Just have this table.
When she says that, she means she wants her computer up on the screen.
Just dim the lights, or maybe just a little bit so the PowerPoint shows. Yeah, that's.
She wants the mood lighting.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
Thank you.
The state has the wrong man.
The state has the wrong man.
Wow.
Paul Caneiro's missing. The evidence, the facts, and the lack of information that we have in this case support that conclusion. They support a finding of not guilty in this case. And I'm going to spend some time explaining why. As I told you from the beginning, this case is about tunnel vision, it's about confirmation bias, and it's about proving a hypothesis. I'm going to ask you to recall the testimony, the testimony of expert witness John Lightbody and expert witness Detective Cordoma, who testified about how precise the scientific method is. They explained to you that when they are trying to ascertain how a fire started, when they're trying to collect a conclusion or establish a conclusion, they engage in a very distinct methodology. And that methodology is not choosing a hypothesis and then taking the steps to prove it. It's actually the opposite. They establish multiple hypotheses, and then they take the steps to disprove all of them until they're left with one.
She's far away from the mic, and I really have to turn the gain up to hear her.
And the reason they do that,
that's a lot of noise,
is because oftentimes,
we almost showed the jury,
or at least sometimes, the evidence isn't clear at first. Sometimes two things can be true or potentially true at once. And as a result, experts such as Mr. Lightbody and Mr. Detective Cordoma,
she takes a slurp mid-sentence.
Sneak preview.
That was a lot of slides.
Sometimes two things can be true at once, and you have to take the necessary and the required steps to make sure that you're not being misled by the evidence in front of you, or confused, or perhaps just too focused on one thing and ignoring something else. And these experts told you what their methodology was specifically. They go to the location and they start in the exterior and they do a whole observation of the exterior and they look to see if anything's out of place or what's going on. Then they go inside and they start, I think they said like the furthest point away from where potentially could be an origin, or they go through certain floors and they end up where it appears to be the fire, closest to where the fire started, and they look at all sorts of things and they rule out, is it electric, is it gas, is it this, is it that? And ultimately, when they're able to rule out these other hypotheses, that's how they know know that they have arrived at the correct conclusion. And in this case, when it came to the investigation itself, and I don't mean the arson investigation specifically, and I don't mean the ballistics, I mean the investigation. I mean the case itself, and determining who did this. There were no multiple hypotheses. There were no multiple theories. There was nothing ruled out. What they did was exactly what Detective Petrozello told you toward the end of his testimony. They followed the evidence. They followed the evidence that landed on their lap, and they focused on it, and yes, it pointed to Paul. But a failure to look for evidence, a failure to collect evidence, and a failure to preserve certain evidence can, and I submit to you did in this case, ultimately lead to the wrong conclusion. November 20th of 2018. It was 7 years ago, 3 months, and some days. To be exact, it was 2,641 days and 63,480 hours. And I ask that you keep that in mind. I ask that you keep in mind how much time has passed since the beginning of this investigation. Now, I talk to all of you folks first, and then the state gets up and they respond. I don't know what they're going to say.
I do. Paul's guilty.
We all sat through the same trial, so I have a pretty good guess of what I think they're going to say, and I'm going to work off of that. I don't know if I'll think of everything that they ultimately submit to you. But I also want to note the reason why I don't know everything that they're going to say to you is because, as the judge will instruct you, a closing argument is just that. It is an argument. And ultimately, the evidence that all of you heard and saw and observed, that's what controls. So when the prosecutor gets up here and tells his story, which I think will go something like this, the prosecutor will tell you that on November 19th of 2018, Paul Caneiro was in some sort of argument with his brother. His brother, Keith, was upset about...
She's now summing up the state's argument.
And you heard the phone calls
Can't make this up.
between Keith and Paul, but you only heard Keith's side. You didn't really hear Paul's side. But you heard a little bit of Paul's side because you heard Keith's reaction. And you heard Keith talking to Paul and saying, Paul, wake up, wake up. I want to log into this account. Get me the login. And the state, I suspect, will tell you that for whatever reason, that prompted Paul Caneiro to be concerned. And the state told you in their opening argument that Paul Caneiro's finances was a house of cards. And I'm going to address that shortly. They're going to tell you, I suspect, that Paul Caneiro was at some level of financial desperation where it was the perfect storm, I suppose, between his financial situation that they theorize and the fact that Keith was upset with him that night. They're going to tell you that, I guess a few hours later, after that phone call in the early morning hours, that Paul Caneiro turned off his surveillance system, and that he did so because he was about to commit these horrendous crimes. They're going to tell you that he left his house and drove to Keith Caneiro's house, and that from point A to point B, even though we don't have surveillance from point A to point B, they're going to submit to you that it was Paul Caneiro driving, and that he arrives at 15 Willowbrook, and the tragedy ensues. And they're going to tell you that Mr. Caneiro used a gun and used a knife to kill his family members.
This is nuts.
And then they're going to tell you that Mr. Caneiro went back home and took evidence with him, bloody clothes, put it in his basement, and lit his house on fire. Left the gas can on the front lawn. They're going to tell you things about the gun, that the gun was separated from the barrel. The gun is in the gun safe in his basement. The barrel's in a bag found in the car later. And they're going to tell you that Mr. Caneiro did all of that, I suspect, to make it seem like he himself was also a victim. That it was some elaborate, poor thought out plan that he concocted that night after a phone call with Keith Caneiro. I'm going to tell you.
This is one of the worst closings ever.
I'm going to tell you why that is simply not true.
She has reasonable doubts.
See, the state is working
multiple
off
doubts.
of pieces.
Reasonable doubts.
You heard a lot of testimony from many different witnesses. And not a single one of you, not a single one of them could tell you that story. The state is piecing together puzzle pieces and trying to create a picture of what happened, or what they think happened. But the pieces don't exactly fit. They just don't. There's things that don't make sense. And if you recall the testimony that we heard from approximately 50 witnesses. First, we heard from Guli Besu. She told you about the contract negotiations with Doris Duke. She didn't tell you anything bad about Paul Caneiro. She certainly didn't tell you that Paul Caneiro was responsible for this murder. We heard from Stephen Weinstein and Ron Artigas, who were the accountant and insurance broker for Keith and Paul, the Caneiro brothers. And they just told you some background information about what was going on with the businesses and the accounting and how money flowed within the businesses and the insurance policies that they had. They didn't tell you anything bad about Paul. They didn't tell you that Paul murdered his brother or his brother's family.
But you
In fact, then we heard from Ben Palaucci. And Mr. Palaucci, who took the stand, said he was a friend of Keith's. And he was aware that Keith was a little upset with Paul. I think he said 6 months prior, which is maybe June or so, close to April. And he mentioned about it was something about money, which aligns with what happened in April, which we'll talk about. But he also said after that conversation, somewhere between April and June, or 6 months prior to November, that everything was fine. Everything was copacetic. He agreed with that. He said that they went out to lunch. He saw them all the time. He would see Keith all the time. And when he saw Keith, sometimes Paul would be there. And everything was normal. Everything was fine. He told you that the day that Keith learned that Keith's house was on fire, the first person he contacted was Paul. And he said, Paul, you got to get to your brother's house. Your brother's house is on fire. And Paul tried to explain to him, I can't, my own house was on fire and I'm at the police station. And Ben is urging Paul to get there. Why? Because Ben knows that Paul is his person. Because Ben knows that if anyone cared that Keith's house was on fire or should be there or would want to be there, it's Paul. He didn't even have Corey's number. The other brother. I'll put that aside for a moment. I want to focus on how close Keith and Paul were. Detective Bassett testified next. She was the financial detective. We're going to talk about really the heart of her testimony momentarily. But her testimony was simply about finances. And it was more more specifically about what she focused on with respect to the finances. It wasn't a full story.
We don't know if she has a time limit.
We heard from Heather Kapp and Jonathan Harrington. Those were very interesting witnesses because they told you, and again, we'll talk about this, that they saw two people. Well, let me back up. Heather Kapp said that she heard and saw two people outside of Paul's home at 4:30 a.m. She was very precise and specific about the time. And Jonathan Harrington told all of you that he heard two men outside of Paul's home at approximately 4:30. Not precisely, but approximately.
Is it reasonable that could have been Keith and Paul?
And they told you that they didn't know who these men were. But it's very interesting that they both heard / saw the two men at around the same time. And it was a half hour before the fire. Then we heard from Officer Marino, Officer Redman, and Officer Bernhardt. Those were the first responding officers to Paul's house at 27 Tilton Drive that day. And they just told you what they saw. They told you about the suspicious things that they observed, the gas can on the lawn, the burn mark on the car, near the gas can, near the garage. They told you about how it was a suspicious scene, and one officer saw a couple of footprints. It was essentially the backdrop to what started the arson investigation. It was clear, the testimony made it clear, that it was clear to these officers pretty quickly after they arrived on scene that this was an arson. The gas can gave it away. The fact that there was two separate fires on opposite ends of the house gave it away. The burn mark on the car gave it away. And that's what their testimony was about. They couldn't tell you who started the fire. They talked a little bit about their conversations with Mr. Caneiro when they arrived on the scene. We'll talk about that. But they did not offer any of you any information as to who started these fires, or more importantly, who committed the crimes. We heard from Chris Sorrentino, the first responder. He was a fireman who happened to live around the corner, and he was there pretty much within minutes. And he just told you he tried to put out the fire. We heard from Fire Marshal Flanagan. We'll talk about him later, but he certainly didn't tell you who started the fire. We heard from Catherine Lachise, who was a 911 caller at Keith's house, 15 Willowbrook. And she basically just told you she saw the smoke, she called 911. She has no idea who started the fire. Detective Brady, he was the detective from Ocean Township at Paul's house that day. He spoke to Paul. Paul cooperated with him in numerous respects. Again, we'll talk about that later. But he didn't tell you who started the fire. He didn't tell you who committed these crimes. He told you about his role in the entire investigation, which was fairly limited to specifically Ocean Township. He really didn't have anything to do with Cold Snap. We heard from Officer Mazzicola, who was the first responding officer at 15 Willowbrook. And he explained that when he first got there, he pulled in the driveway. We saw, I think, his MVR, his motor vehicle recording. He goes up to the house. He's trying to see what's going on. Told you about his initial observations. Another piece of the puzzle. But nothing directly leading to Paul.
She's put a pin in a lot of different topics. I'm not sure when we're going to circle back.
Detective Zerillo. He was the lead detective. He was Detective Brady's counterpart in Cold Snap. And he told you about his role in the Cold Snap investigation and what he contributed to the investigation. He did things. He helped out. He investigated. We heard it. tell you that Paul Caneiro committed this murder. These murders. These crimes. We heard from Boris Wolstein, who was another 911 caller. We're going to talk about him in just a little bit too. But he's a 911 caller. Another piece of the puzzle.
Are we still in the preview? And she's just warming up. We might be here
We
all
heard
day.
from Giselle Restrepo, friend of Paul's. She had good things to say about Paul. She said he was a good friend. She said she didn't have anything bad to say about him.
I get the feeling that we're seeing a rarely used defense tactic known as the filibuster.
She had a good relationship with him. She certainly didn't tell you that Paul Caneiro is capable of these crimes.
The basic idea is you just keep talking until someone on the jury dies.
We heard from
what she's doing.
Carmelo, who's a firefighter, who had a very limited role. He fought the fire at 15 Willowbrook, and unfortunately he had to remove Sophia's body. But he doesn't know how Sophia's body got there. He doesn't know who's responsible. We heard from Tyler Badaracco, another firefighter. I think mostly about the generator. That's all. We heard from Detective Mahoney and Detective Weisbrot, and they talked a lot about surveillance videos, and they discussed what you could see on the surveillance videos, and we're going to talk about that also. The surveillance videos are interesting because they're probative and they're compelling in a way, but they do not show you who committed these crimes. We heard from Detective Corpora, again, the arson investigator. He determined it's an arson. He doesn't determine by who. We heard from Detective Catalona. He processed the scene at Paul's house. And Detective Vogt, who processed the scene at 15 Willowbrook. They collected evidence. They didn't draw any conclusions. We heard from, again, John Lightbody, determined it was an arson at Paul's house. No surprise there. Doesn't tell you who, can't tell you who. We heard from Detective Inglorisi. He did the phone extractions and he read messages to you. That was his primary role in this case. And he gave you some background information about the communications, some communications, a few communications, 3 occasions specifically, April, September, and November, out of an entire year. And you heard testimony that they talked every day, whether by text, by phone, by email, by message, by anything, in person. And you heard text messages between the 2 brothers from 3 of those days. We heard from Robert Block, who used to work at Square One with Keith and Paul. He testified about an alert he received about essentially saying the power went out, servers were down. So didn't have anything bad to say about Paul. We heard from Trooper Cocking, who had the canine at 27 Tilton. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, a limited role. In fact, I think he made that very clear. He's like, I'm just the dog guy. It's a tool. It's an aid in the investigation. Can't tell you anything more than that. We heard from Detective Petrozello, the lead detective in this case. And we're going to talk about him too. He testified about his role in the investigation and things that he did and things that he reviewed. He wasn't there when this happened. There's no eyewitnesses. No one, including the lead detective, can tell you who did this. And then we have all of the DNA people. And again, we're going to talk about that too. We have serology. We have Allison Lane, Judith Link, Chris Symposiak, Teresa Nezazon, Christine Schlenker, Danielle Reed. And the interesting thing about DNA, which again we'll talk about
later,
is that it can tell you potentially whether someone's DNA profile is contained or has been deposited in some way on an item, or whether it's more likely, we're talking about likelihood ratios, that the DNA is contained in a mixture versus not contained in a mixture. But every DNA person agreed, every DNA expert, I should say, including our own, explained to you that what DNA does not tell you is the who, what, when, where, or why. DNA can't tell you how the DNA got there. It can't tell you whether there's an innocent explanation or a nefarious explanation. It can't tell you whether it was directly deposited or transferred. It can't tell you if it's contamination. It can't tell you why the DNA is there. It can't tell you the backstory. It's just a fact. And I know that DNA can be compelling, so we will talk about it.
We know how the kids' DNA got there.
We heard from Michael Abraham. He had a very limited role. It was with respect to the electric 15 Willowbrook. And he assisted in the context of him looking at being an electrical engineer. He assisted Detective Bordoma with determining, ultimately, that 15 Willowbrook was also an arson. Again, no surprise there. We heard from Christopher Clayton, the ballistics expert. And similar to the arson and the DNA, he told you that certain bullets matched bullets, that certain bullets matched a barrel, and that shell casings matched a receiver. He can't tell you who shot the gun. He can't tell you who used the gun. He doesn't know. He's examining this information days, weeks later. He can't tell you that Paul Caneiro is responsible for these crimes. Lastly, we heard from the medical examiners. And that testimony was tragic. It was heart-wrenching. Those medical examiners can only tell you the cause and manner of the death, which we know, which we're not disputing. They can't tell you who killed them. So the state, with all of those pieces, with all of those puzzle pieces, all of those facts, we're going to come up here and tell you a story of what, again, is the theory of what happened. And I just ask that all of you be mindful and keep in mind, what is a fact? What did you actually hear? What did you actually see? What do you actually know as a result of the testimony? Versus what is the argumentative thread that is weaving these pieces together to create a story? What is fact versus what is argument? Now, with that in mind, with the evidence we heard, with what is anticipated the state will argue, and again, I don't know exactly what they're going to say. This is my best guess. These are the reasons to doubt that story. And just remember, we'll talk about this at the end, but it's their burden. They have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any and all reasonable doubt, that Mr. Caneiro is responsible for these crimes. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to discuss with you is that there are many reasons to doubt. But all you need is one. That's it. The first reason to doubt the state's theory is that Paul loved his family.
Okay, now we're getting into
We
stuff.
heard testimony from Paul's oldest daughter, Katie, that he was closest to his Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Keith, that they weren't extended family, but rather one big family. I asked her, how was he with Jesse and Sophia? And she said, he treated them like he treated me and Marissa, like his own kids. And he would drop everything for us. He'd always be there. He was very supportive. He was just good to have around. And we heard testimony about a special bond between Paul and Jesse, because Paul had 2 daughters. And Jesse was the only boy in the family. And so it was really exciting for Paul to develop a relationship with Jesse. It was like his son, it was like his own son, is what you heard. And Katie explains they had a great relationship. They had a lot of things in common, and Jesse loved history, my dad loves history, so they would do a lot of things like that. And Jesse was learning how to swim. He asked my dad, who I tagged along with, and we watched his little race when he learned to swim. And then one time, I think Jesse was in preschool, he was able to bring a special friend to show off to his class, and he invited my dad, Paul. And they did things together. When Jesse was bored at home, he would call Paul. And either Jesse would get dropped off and spend time with Paul, or they'd go out together, they'd do things, they'd spend time together. They did a lot together, were her words. We saw some photos. Now, to be clear, you heard Katie explain on her direct testimony that there were many photos taken. That's just a sample. I'm not going to stand in front of you all day with many photos. I think you get the gist. Many photos were taken of the family, of the one big family. Now, who is Paul Caneiro? You heard from people that knew him best. You heard from his family members, and you heard from people that were like his family members, family friends that were so close that they considered the Caneiros their family. And you heard that Paul was highly intelligent, very smart. He's very well educated. He's very helpful. He's a friendly, kind, caring man, knowledgeable and level-headed, a loving, family-oriented person, calm, even-tempered, mild-mannered. And then he never really raised his voice, that he wasn't a yeller. He didn't really yell. Not even at his own kids, running around being kids. That just wasn't his temperament. You heard that he tended to take a more logical approach to things. And you heard from Dr. Gould and his wife Pam, who were neighbors with them for a really long time. You heard from Stacy Pritchett, who is Paul's wife's best friend since high school, has known Paul since they were 16 years old. And you heard from her husband, Jim. These are people that have known the family forever. And they told you how close Paul and Keith were, that they were exceptionally close. Some people will even say they were fused at the hips. They could talk about many different things. They were always joking, laughing. They had a very close, caring relationship. You could just feel that they cared for each other. They spent a lot of time together, obviously working together. But outside of work, they spent a lot of time together as well. And I think that that's something that I would ask that all of you keep that in mind. Because while the state's theory of motive is sort of surrounding the business, what fails to be appreciated is the bigger picture. Because yes, they're brothers. You heard from Katie, they felt like brothers. They were business partners. They had disagreements. You had the opportunity to hear some of them. That never took away from the family dynamic. That was one aspect of their overall relationship, which was largely personal. brothers were really close. It was the type of love that Jim Pritchard said if he had a brother, he would want that type of love between him and his brother. That's what he observed. They were close, and it was kind of the Caneiro brothers against the world. They were just loyal to one another. They had a very loving relationship. Paul would call Keith his person, his best friend. He was always there for Keith. They were best friends and business partners. And he was very protective of Keith, and he loved him very much. And one of the themes in this case is that Paul had a habit, almost what he felt was like an obligation, it seemed, to always help his brother. His brother wasn't very handy, you heard. If he needed help with something at the house, Paul would be there. If he needed a light bulb change, if he needed help with the pool, if he needed help with this or that, Paul would run over, he would stop over, and he would always help because Paul was the handy one. He knew how to do those things. And the state is going to try to use that against Paul to say, well, Paul, he knew Keith's house, he knew the ins and outs, he knew how to work the electric and the gas, and he knew how to do these things at Keith's house. So that's one more reason why they think he's responsible for the murders. One has nothing to do with the other. And I'm going to talk about that later too. The fact that Paul was a loving, helpful brother and would go to his brother's house at the drop of a dime to help him.
All the money?
That just means he's a good brother. That's what that means. And it means that that's the type of relationship that they had. And Keith could rely on Paul. Like he did when he went back to school. Because when Keith went back to school, Keith was busy. He went to Columbia, a nice school. He had to take classes, he had to study, he had to do the things. And so Paul stepped up, and you heard that he was more involved with the day-to-day with the businesses. You heard he was very supportive of Keith going back to school. And that Keith would even ask Paul for help with his classes. You heard that from Dr. Gould. It wasn't uncommon that Keith would contact Paul, I guess, about classes, things to do if there was a project, for advice.
Is she plugging her ears?
And you also heard
who's the lady that's plugging her ears? In purple, blonde hair.
Tell you that there was a conversation between Paul and Keith.
Why is she plugging her ears?
Where Keith is asking Paul to help him with a lab assignment that he wasn't able to do it. He tried multiple times. He was having a problem. He couldn't pass it, and so he asked Paul to log in as him and do the assignment. And Paul did it. Paul was 100% supportive.
We've had 1,000% in
What
this
was
trial.
Paul's relationship with Jesse and Sophia? We heard a little bit before from Katie. But Dr. Gould says it's fabulous. By the time Jesse and Sophia were coming around, especially when they were, 8, 12 in that ballpark, it's actually 8 and 11, his children were already in their 20s. They were older. So it was kind of like having kids again. He especially loved Jesse because he had 2 daughters. We talked about that. He could just do things with Jesse that he may not have done with his daughters. But he loved them very much. He kind of spoiled them on the holidays. Paul loved those kids like his own, especially with Jesse. He had a close bond. I know they did lunch dates from time to time. You could just see the bond when they were together. They would just connect. Paul loved Keith and Jen and those children. Jim says, I know Paul loved both of them, like having grown-up daughters. Sophia was just another beautiful little girl, and he loved Jesse. He thought that he was Jim thought he was a calming influence on Jesse. And it seemed that there was just a special bond that the two of them had because he was the only little boy in the group. And Stacy said, I can tell you that he loved them very much. I I would say Jesse was the son he didn't have. He loved Jesse. He loved Sophia. He absolutely adored those kids. I know when Jesse was in preschool or kindergarten, he was allowed to bring an adult to school, and he chose his Uncle Paul. And that's how much Jesse loved Paul. And it was absolutely reciprocated. He absolutely loved Jesse. He absolutely loved Sophia. He loved those kids. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is Uncle Paul. That is Uncle Paul.
Uncle Paul.
Now, going a little bit more into the state's evidence. Their theory of motive doesn't add up. It literally does not add up. And I told you this in opening. And now I'm going to break it down for you now that we've heard the testimony. So the state told you at the beginning of this case that Paul's financial situation was a house of cards. But what did you actually hear?
She's reading word for
Now
word.
we heard like over a day of testimony from Detective Bassender. And it was a lot of it was a very lengthy breakdown of the financials. Day 2 of her testimony, it was almost like, here's the data. And then day 2 in the morning on cross-examination was more like, now here are the conclusions. But I'm going to start with Billy Bassey for a moment. What did you hear from Gooley? That Doris Duke was actively negotiating with Square One at the time of the murders. The murders happened on in the evening of November 19th, going into the early morning hours of November 20th.
It's not the judge's candy. Unless he's doing it under the desk.
A couple days before that, Keith sent a proposal to Doris Duke. And a few days before that, on the 13th, about a week before the murders, Keith had a meeting with Gooley and other members from Doris Duke. And you heard from Gooley that they were actively negotiating, that there were certain things that she wanted to change. She wanted 24/7 access. She wanted the costs to come down. And she wanted a more competitive rate.
Might be a
and
juror.
Keith was working on it, along with Paul. They were working on it together. And Keith sent a proposal, and one of those proposals was a 6-year contract option. It was 4 years with the option to renew an additional 2, which meant that Keith was proposing 2 days, or 3 days technically, before the murders, since they happened in the early morning hours. He was proposing that if you accept this contract, Paul and I are going to continue to work with you for the next 6 years. Yes, Keith was applying to jobs. He applied to some jobs with his friend Ben, who worked at Amazon. He was trying to create a backup plan because he was a little worried. Why was Keith worried? You heard it in the messages. He's not on disability. He doesn't have a sure income if things were to ultimately fall through. And Keith you kind of heard he's like a high-strung guy. So he wants a backup plan. He's going to Columbia. He's trying to further his education. He's trying to put himself in the best position, but he also, you heard, lives a nice lifestyle. You saw photos of his home. Ben, his friend, explained to you a little bit about his lifestyle. He had nice cars. You heard he had a nanny named Claudia. Paul had expenses.
Did he have an au pair?
Keith had expenses. But Paul was on disability. And Keith wasn't. So Keith just wanted to make sure he had a backup plan. What you heard from the witness on the stand is that she only had to renew, or she only had to terminate her contract with Square One after the murders happened. She had to find another vendor. We don't know what would have happened if the murders didn't occur. They could have renewed. You heard from Robert Block, he had no expectation that he was going to lose his job. He assumed he was going to continue working for Square One. There was no indication to one of the main persons who worked in that business, Robert Block, that the business was going to end. The hope was that it would continue, and Keith and Paul were actively working on that. Now they had a second business, pest control business, EcoStar. And again, there was ongoing negotiations for some time about the sale of EcoStar. They got a pretty good offer at some point. And at some point it was $850,000, and then it was $750,000. And you heard testimony that initially Keith wanted to hold off. He was like, let's try to get $1 million. Because Keith believed that that was feasible. And initially, Steve Weinstein, he testified that he told them, yeah, waiting could help. But then, as we got closer to the December, when the contract with Doris Duke was subject to termination at that point, we don't know. Again, active negotiations. But Keith was a little bit pushy at this point, and he's like, you know what, maybe we need to just sell. You know, he's stressed. He's looking again for another backup plan just in case. And Paul's telling him, hold off. We might still get $1 million. We might still get more money. Relax. I think you heard it in the messages. Paul's like, relax, relax. And regardless of whether they sold it for $1 million or whether they sold it for $750,000 or anything in that ballpark, Paul was a 50% owner. That's the one they owned 50-50. So whatever they sold it for, Paul gets half. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if Paul was desperate for money, he would have just sold it. And he would have just said, yeah, okay, Keith, I agree, let's sell it now. Let's get half of $750,000 or $850,000 or whatever it was in that ballpark. Paul was not in a rush for money. That's why he was telling Keith to relax and to wait and see if they could get more, like they originally planned. He was trying to refocus Keith on that original plan. Now, in addition to the potential income if Doris Duke renewed the company, Square One, and in addition to the potential to gain funds from the sale of EcoStar, Paul is on disability. This was the testimony of Detective Bassender. He was making $232,292 in disability alone. Detective Bassender agreed that was a significant amount of money.
$232,000 in disability?
And here's the interesting thing, because he had 3 different disability insurance policies. You heard Ron Artigas testify. These were like kind of sophisticated insurance guys.
Seems shady.
They knew a little bit more about insurance than the average person, and they were well insured. So he had an Unum disability policy where he would make $9,490 a month. Then he had a Sun Life disability policy where he earned $7,430 a month. And from Social Security, he earned $2,446 a month.
Can we say collected instead of earned?
Now, what happened is that payments from one of those insurance policies, they had temporarily stopped from June 2017 to November of 2018. Detective Bassender testified about that. And the reason is because he had received some sort of like lump sum, and it was like an overpayment. So to compensate for that, the insurance company said, we're gonna pause your payments for a period of time. But once those payments caught up, And once the lack of payments amounted to the original overpayment, starting December 20th, a month after this happened, the next month, a few weeks into the next month, Paul was going to get that additional money. He was going to get $7,430 each month. He was about to make more money a few weeks before the murder. So we have the income from the disability, potential proceeds from EcoStar sale, which is a lot of money, and the income from Square One if Doris Duke renewed the contract. Paul, who loved his family, he had no motive. This does not add up to a motive. This does not add up to desperation. This does not add up to a sudden change. He goes from being loving and caring and kind and helpful
to stabby, pew,
a
pew.
wonderful brother, a wonderful uncle, just like that, and he horrendously murders his entire family. Does that make any sense? It doesn't make sense. Not with this math. And Detective Bassender testified that his fixed utilities versus his expenses. And she testified he had high expenses. That's where the issue was from the state's perspective, is that he had a lot of expenses. But those were not fixed expenses. His mortgage was like $3,000 a month. $36,600 a year. The vehicle leases were $25,000 if you consider that, almost $26,000 a year if you consider that a fixed expense. He liked the cars. Utilities, maybe a little under $10,000 if you add up electricity, gas, water, sewer. And then for one of his insurance companies, he had to make I guess a yearly payment, I think it was monthly, but amounted to about $5,000 a year to maintain that policy. So we're talking total fixed expenses of $76,973 approximately. Now the income from disability, if you apply a 39% tax rate, the net is $141,759. If you do the math, it leaves about $65,000 in disposable income. If you include the Audi lease, you could subtract that. It's about $10,000 a year. You're at $55,000. And that's net. And Detective Bassender, when Mr. Murray questioned her, acknowledged you can always lower your expenses if you have to. That was a concern. You can lower your expenses. Paul had that option if push come to shove. Does it make sense that instead of lowering his expenses, if he needed to, he would instead murder his family? He could have just sold EcoStar. He wanted to hold on. He was not desperate for money. That's not what this is about. That's what they think this is about. Now, the $78,000 from the trust also does not add up. So the state alleges that over the course of 2017 and 2018, Paul took money from the trust. Now there's the trust itself is a life insurance policy is maintained within that. And there's a TD trust account that's really just it's called a trust account in name, but it's really a checking account. That's what Detective Bassender testified to. And they put money in the TD bank account to then transfer money and make payments to the life insurance policy to maintain that policy. Now, Paul was the trustee. And the expert, Cardenas, Mr. Cardenas, he explained that Paul, being the trustee didn't require him to make those payments toward the Canada Life Insurance policy, but he could certainly be designated as that person. And the state is alleging that Paul, rather than using the money that was funded from the business into the TD Trust account to pay the life insurance policy premiums, that instead he was taking the money. Now, assuming that is true, Paul was paying it back. You heard testimony that from Stephen Weinstein that it's a family business. There was money constantly flowing in and out of accounts. Keith and Paul are paying money into the company, their own personal money. The company is paying money back to them. The company paid money into the trust, and the trust paid money back into the company. There's money flowing all sorts of ways. And Detective Bassender kind of, again, it was a lengthy testimony, but that's essentially what $78,000. It's actually $78,180 is what is $80 is what is alleged. You're left with $58,300. In 2018, Paul paid $27,207 to Square One. Now, remember, in April of 2018, April 11th, that's the email that the state read to you multiple times from Paul to Keith about the $25,045 that was taken from the trust. And Paul says, oops, I misapplied it to something else. And Paul was, according to Steve Weinstein at that point, overly upset at everyone. He was annoyed. He was frustrated. He wanted the money to be paid to the life insurance policy, rightfully so. But Paul sends an email and he says, I will pay it back with interest. And he does. Because on April 26th of 2018, he pays $5,000 to Square One, to the business account. And on April 30th of 2018, he pays $10,000 to the Square One account. And on May 15th of 2018, he pays $11,400. And on that same date, he pays another $807. Now, he's paying this money to the business account. The business that he owns with Keith. Keith being the 90% owner. He's not paying the business because he's a client of the business. He's putting the money into the business account because he's giving Keith access to that money. And Keith can decide, hey, here's the money that I owe to the trust. The business funds the TD Trust account, and the TD Trust account funds the life insurance policy. So Paul has the money, and it's paid back by the next month. And he says, through his actions, by putting the money in the account, Keith can now have access to that money. Does he want to put it in the TD Trust account so that the payment can be made? He could. But instead, Keith transfers that money to his personal account, which then goes to an account in Greece because Keith is building a house in Greece. Paul's not building a house in Greece. Paul's providing the money that was taken from the trust account. He's paying it back with interest. And Keith decides, instead of putting that money toward the Canada Life Insurance policy, he's going to use it to pay for his house in Greece. That was Keith's choice. But Paul paid it back. And it was not unusual for this to occur. Because in prior years, according to Ron Artigas, the trust was often underfunded. This resulted in a loan against the Canada Life Insurance policy. As early as 2007, over 10 years prior, the loan against the policy was $45,000. Now, what does this mean? Paul was, in order to maintain the Canada life insurance policy, he had to have those payments made, the premium payments. It was like $7,000 a quarter and some change. Now, if the premium doesn't get paid, it's not the case that the insurance policy gets canceled. Instead, the insurance policy takes a loan out against the ultimate amount of money. So the loan in 2007 was $45,000, which means if the policy was ultimately cashed out, it would be, the $45,000 would be subtracted from the cash value. That's what that means. But what it also means
is that right?
Is that as early as 2007, payments weren't being made.
It's subtracted from the cash
life insurance
value.
Policy. This was not unusual because, again, as
Not
Steve
the payout
Weinstein
value,
testified, the money was flowing all around in different accounts, and the brothers decided what their priority was at the time. Sometimes it was funding the business. Sometimes it was being able to meet payroll for their employees. Sometimes it was Keith's house in Greece. Sometimes it was a life insurance policy. But it really just depended on what was happening at the time. There wasn't a strict schedule. It clearly was not the case that all of these payments were consistently made and monitored, and it was, something that was streamlined for many, many years, and suddenly it's getting all messed up. That's not what happened. It was the same thing just happening consistently over the years. In 2018, in April, the loan was $72,000. So from 2007 to 2018, the loan grew by about $30,000, which means over the course of those years, the loan, sometimes it was paid, sometimes it grew. This wasn't unusual. But in December of 2018, again, Keith was just stressed because he didn't have the fallback of the disability money that Paul had. He relied on that business income. He relied on that money to fund his lifestyle. And so he knew that if the Doris Stu contract didn't renew for any reason, he was going to need access to money. And that's why he was concerned suddenly in November about the money. Again, April, same thing. Paul says, oops, I took this money from the trust, I will pay it back. And he does.
I did it again.
And from April to November, everything's fine. He gets over it. Paul and Keith are the same that they've always been. That didn't affect their relationship. And by the way, you heard testimony that in prior years, 2014, 2015, 2016, the same thing happened. The same thing happened. Paul borrowed money from the trust and paid it back.
I fixed it. That was my logo.
I think I have a
purple.
slide here somewhere. Here we go, at the end. In 2014, $35,000 was taken. Paul paid it back in full. Detective Bassender testified to this. In 2015, $27,000 was withdrawn and $22,000 was repaid. In 2016, $17,700 was withdrawn and $14,700 was repaid. Again, it is a pattern. It is not unusual that with all of the different business accounts, including and the personal accounts and the trust accounts, that the brothers are prioritizing what they need the money for in the moment, and they take money and they transfer it and they use it and they borrow it and then it gets paid back.
The difference is
In fact,
Paul didn't have permission to take it from the trust fund.
You heard testimony that
Keith can do whatever he wants.
Paul, this is either from Steve or Ron, that Paul loaned the company money In 2016, and this is, they call it a loan to officers, because Keith and Paul, being the owners of the business, they're the officers, the two of them. They both lent the business money from their personal money, their personal funds. Now, Keith is the 90% owner, and he's lending the business as of 2016, $118,690. And Paul, being only the 10% owner, loans the company more than that. He takes his own personal money, his money, and he puts it into the business. $179,285.
I thought a loan to officer was where the company loans money to the officer, not the officer
as of
loans money.
2016. It wasn't ever paid back. The business never paid them back. It was still an outstanding loan. But this was one more aspect as to how the brothers ran their business. Put money into it, they took money out of it. And the trust account was just another account that was part of that. Paul took money from the account, borrowed it, 2014.
He borrowed it.
Paid it back. And then he did the same in 2015 and paid most of it back. And then did the same in 2016 and paid most of it back. And then did the same in April of 2018 and paid it back. What makes this time any different? Suddenly, now that it's happening again in November, suddenly now's the time that Paul's worried? He's now suddenly worried. Oh, Keith found out. And they're going to talk about the records. There's records, fake bank account records, and the state's going to argue that Paul created those records to trick Keith and Steve Weinstein to pretend that he was making those payments.
Yeah.
He was going to pay back. You don't want Keith to get mad. In April, Keith is overly upset. He's overly upset. Doesn't want to deal with that. He's going to pay back. And Keith finding out doesn't change the fact that this has happened before. Paul knows that Keith is under stress. They're brothers and they work together. He knows that Keith is worried about the Doris Duke contract, and Paul is trying to tell him it's going to be okay, it's going to work out, it's going to be fine. Him taking or borrowing money from the trust and even trying to hide that from Keith temporarily does not make him a vicious, monstrous murderer. Those are two totally different things.
Well, but
and
it
one
does
has
give him
nothing
motive.
to do with the other, and one is normal. It's normal for these guys.
It's not the murder part, right?
Of course, Paul didn't want to upset Keith. Of course, he didn't want Keith to get upset again. The money could have been paid back at some point without Keith realizing. But even if he did, they're still brothers.
This attorney makes it sound like embezzlement is okay if you pay it back.
Doesn't make him a murderer. Now, Paul wasn't the only one who was aware that sometimes Keith would get a little worked up. Because in April, when Steve said that Keith was overly upset, in November, Steve says when he spoke to Keith, he tried to calm him down and told him to get some sleep and they would deal with it in the morning. So on November 19th of 2018, when Keith is telling Steve what's happening and what he's realizing, Paul borrowed money from the trust again. He's not happy about it. He doesn't want a loan on that life
Keeps trying
insurance
to
policy.
say borrowed.
Steve says, we'll deal with this tomorrow.
He didn't have the right to it. You can't borrow.
Steve's not like, oh my God, this is shocking. This is a revelation. No. This is par for the course. Okay, Keith, relax. Go to bed, calm down. We'll deal with it in the morning, we'll figure it out. You heard on the phone when Keith is trying to get Paul to give him the login. Paul is yelling at Keith, "Wake up, Paul, wake up." Because Keith wants to know what's happening now.
Maybe Paul pledged to return the money.
He wasn't feeling well. And he also, just like Steve Weinstein, figured we'll deal with it in the morning. At some point, Keith did say to Paul, "I'm going to give you a couple hours." And he was hoping that Paul would wake up at some point and give him answers that night. Because again, Keith is a little high-strung. He wants to know what's happening. And this was the conversation that Steve Weinstein testified to. You told him to try to calm down and get some sleep, yes? And you told him basically we can handle this in the morning. We should look into this tomorrow. Tomorrow. Now, I think it's clear from the testimony that when it comes to the actual money derived from this life insurance policy, $3 million, the state did not follow that money. They were very focused on this $78,000 in trust situation and money being borrowed and paid back and taken. But they were not concerned so much with where did this $3 million end up. And this question was asked to a couple different witnesses in this case. Mr. Murray asked Detective Bassender. I asked Detective Petrozello. And you heard testimony from Mr. Cardenas, the expert, who talked about a slayer statute. And he testified that under that statute, if someone is accused, or convicted, rather, of murdering or being responsible for the death of the policyholder, they get cut off from it, right? And that makes sense, because you're not going to reward a murderer with the life insurance money. You can't kill people to get the money. That's a reasonable law, and that's what that law is. And it's kind of obvious. It's common sense. We wouldn't let people murder people so that they can make money. But what that means is, because Paul and Corey are 50%, I guess, sort of like backup beneficiaries, right? Because originally it's the family. But if they're all deceased, the money gets split between Corey and Paul. Unless Paul is convicted of murdering the family, then it all goes to Corey.
Okay, that's what they wanted to get out in the evidence. Now, unfortunately, there was no evidence.
There was simply no investigation into this. There's no information. You didn't hear any testimony. All you heard was, no, we didn't follow that. Well, we know that Paul's here and Corey's not.
Oh my goodness. That's your logical leap? So
Why
clearly...
not follow this money? Why not look into it? Why not investigate it? Why not rule out a hypothesis? We've had over 7 years to investigate this, and there was no information presented to you. Now, going a little bit more into the facts of the case itself, there was also no investigation into the 2 men that were outside of Paul's house at 4:30 in the morning. We heard this testimony from Heather Kapp and Jonathan Harrington. Heather Kapp testified that at 4:30 a.m., she woke up to excited male voices outside. She looked at her clock, and it was 4:30 a.m. She looked at her window. She saw 2 men running with some type of flashlights. She couldn't distinguish whether it was an actual flashlight or a phone. She wasn't sure, but she saw light. They had dark-colored clothing and black baseball hats. One man ran to the front door and was banging on the front door. She said she heard and saw the banging on the front door. And she never saw him go inside. She was watching him. That's the first man.
Doesn't match
the second
anything
man
else.
she sees goes around to Marilyn Klein's driveway, where you can see the fire from her driveway at the back of Paul's house. You can see that area. And she says this second man was kneeling down for, quote, a good amount of time and just watching the fire, pointing a flashlight in Paul's backyard. And she said at that point there were no cars in Marilyn's driveway. She said she saw an older model four-door sedan outside of her home. She said it was not a pickup truck. And she also testified that she later saw the Caneiro Porsche SUV parked outside. Later saw. She knows what their car looks like. And she says she later saw it. It's not the same car. Their car was not parked in the street at 4:30 in the morning.
This is the same woman who did not call
911,
right?
She lost track of them, and she did not see them again that day. And there were many people around that day. A lot of responders, a lot of people out in the street working on the fire. Neighbors are out of their houses. Never sees them again. She says she saw the fire escalating for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then she saw the first vehicle arrive. She said multiple times that she looked at her clock. Just to put it into context, that's the front of Mr. Caneiro's house. She says the first man runs up, bangs on that door. The second man is in that driveway where you see the red vehicle and the white vehicle, except there were no vehicles at that time. And they're crouched down in the driveway or kneeling for a good amount of time, pointing a flashlight in the direction of Paul's backyard. Who are these people? Jonathan Harrington says he's in bed and he heard loud voices in the street. The voices, he heard them, he testified initially, he heard them between 4:30 and 5. He looked at his cable box clock. And he was a little concerned about marrying himself to a specific time. He was very clear about that. It was around, it was approximate, it could have been 4:45. He didn't want to say it was definitively 4:30. Understandable. He says multiple times, I wasn't looking at a timepiece. I wasn't looking at a phone. It was a cable box clock, and sometimes those can be a few minutes off. We know that. And he says he went back into a light state of sleep, and eventually he wakes up and sees lights. And he goes outside and he sees police cars at around 5 a.m., which is consistent with when the officers arrived. So all of this is happening. He's in bed. He hears the voices. He looks at his clock. He goes back to sleep for a while. Light state of sleep. Wakes back up at some point. He testified about he got dressed, got out of bed, put a hat on or something, came outside at around 5 a.m.
Also didn't call 911.
How certain was Heather Kapp that it was 4:30? Can you tell us exactly how that happened? I woke up to male voices. I turned. I looked at my clock. It was 4:30. Okay, so based upon being woken up, what exactly did you physically do? I woke up and I looked at my clock. And when you heard the voices, you got up and looked out your window. I checked my clock and then I got up out of my bed and I went to my window. So you check your clock first? Yes. And the clock said 4:30? Yes. So at 4:30, you check your clock,
copy-pasting
and you
the
get up and you look
transcript.
out the window. Yes. We talked about how you gave a couple statements. She never wavered from the time of 4:30. She is sure. Unlike Mr. Harrington, who's more approximation-oriented, she's like, it was definitively 4:30. I know I looked at my clock, and she said it numerous times. So just to be clear, 4:30 a.m., you wake up, you hear the voices, the two men, and then you look out your window and you see two men, and she says, after checking my clock. Jonathan Harrington, I asked him, just to be completely clear, when you first heard anything outside your this was the prosecutor. When you first heard anything outside of your window that morning, did you tell the police what time approximately you thought it was? Now, he testified, I probably said it was between 4:30 and 5. But after I showed him his statements from 7 years ago that were taken the week this happened, he agreed. When I asked him, you told both the private investigator and the prosecutor's office the week that this happened, meaning when his memory was most fresh, that you heard these voices at around 4:30 in the morning. Yes. And the prosecutor's office means he's talking to Detective Weisbrot and Detective Brady. And Officer Bones, remember, I showed him a transcript of the body-worn camera. That means it's a transcript of the conversation he had with the officer on scene. On scene, right after this happened, that day. And he tells Officer Bones he heard people talking about a half hour before all of the police got there. And we know what time the police got there. Chris Sorrentino, the fireman, who's around the corner, he gets there the soonest. He's minutes away. Katie calls 911 at 4:58. Chris Sorrentino testifies he's there by around 5:02. Officer Redmond and the remaining officers are dispatched at 5:02 because it takes a few minutes, as we know, for the 911 call or the alarm company to relay the information to dispatch, and dispatch to relay it to the police. So they arrive minutes. Officer Redmond arrives minutes later. He arrives almost very close in time to Chris Sorrentino. Officer Marino gets there around 5:05, 5:06, and Officer Bernhard arrives a few minutes later after 5:02. These officers are not on scene anywhere near 4:30 a.m. It's clear that they are all on scene, including Chris Sorrentino, after 5 o'clock a.m. Now, I understand that it's possible that maybe they were mistaken, right? Maybe Heather Cat, I don't know, maybe her clock was off. Maybe she misread the clock. That's possible, right? But
She's
Jonathan
introducing
Harrington
doubt.
too? They both coincidentally have clocks that are wrong. They both coincidentally see and hear or hear two male voices at 4:30 a.m. or approximately 4:30 a.m. and they're both wrong. Both of them who live right next to each other. What are the chances of that?
What are
If
the
it was
chances
one of them, I would understand.
both of them not calling
Two of
911?
them, both neighbors. How do you explain that? How do you explain that two neighbors heard and or saw the exact same thing at 4:30 a.m., said they checked their clocks? What's happening on 27 Tilton Drive? Everyone's clock is a half hour behind? No. Their testimony and their observations are consistent. And here's the problem. The police never even considered a two-person theory. Because they were focused on Paul. But there are facts in this case that support that two people are responsible for these murders and these crimes. There's two men outside of Paul's house at 4:30. We just talked about that. I'm going to go through the rest. Here's a map of Paul's house, 27 Tilton Drive. And you can see from the map that there's two ways to exit and enter Tilton Drive. There's an intersection at the top, and there's an intersection at the bottom. So if you're at 27 Tilton, you can go toward the top and make a right or a left onto Green Grove Road. You could also come down this way and make a right or a left onto Green Grove Road. And the problem is that we only have surveillance video from that side of Tilton. It's hard to see on the map, but it's that top portion. And not a single officer or detective, including the lead detective responsible for the entire case, could tell you why we don't have video from the other side of Tilton.
I'm going to object to that, Judge.
It's the juror's recollection that controls as to what, if any, testimony there was about attempting to obtain surveillance from the other side of Tilton.
Every detective or officer we heard from said, oh, yeah, they looked. Well, where is it? There's no documentation. I confirmed that with Detective Petrozello. I said, well, can you point me to a report where it explains? Is this another bizarre coincidence on 27 Tilton Drive that the only people on the one side have surveillance cameras? What are the chances that we have 3 or 4 houses on that side of the road, 3 houses, I think, at least, with surveillance cameras, and none on the other side, the entire other side? No one owns a surveillance system? There's no documentation, there's no reporting of, look at all those little boxes. Who lives there?
She's doubling down because the judge
Do
allowed
they
it.
not have cameras? Were they working? Were they not working? Is it a ring? Is it not a ring? Is it motion activated? Is it not motion activated? How about motion activated lights? Because it's dark out. And even if you can't see, maybe you can, I don't know. We don't know because we don't have it.
Where are you going? We would need the
see
camera.
Motion activated lights going off at the time. I'm just pointing out evidence we don't have that I would submit would be relevant to determining whether and where those 2 people went. Where did they go? Those are the 2 intersections. And I submit, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that Heather Kapp and Jonathan Harrington heard 2 men or saw 2 men at 4:30 in the morning in the area. And we don't know what happened to those men. These are the surveillance videos that we have. I'm sure the state will discuss them, so I don't need to go into too much detail at this point, but I'm just showing you a screenshot of what each surveillance video depicts. We have some from 27 Tilton, we have a couple from the area of 15 Willowbrook, and that's all we have. And then we have that one in the bottom corner, that's that little house near, I don't know if it's a house or what, but it's near 15 Willowbrook, and that's when Detective Petrozello, I believe, was testifying. There's a gate. It's a long road. You can't tell how far down that gate you can see. But this is a case where we have 4 people deceased. And we have 2 fires. And we have surveillance video from the area of Mr. Caneiro's home. Then we have surveillance video from the area of 15 Willowbrook, but we don't have anything in between. We don't know the route that, if it is the same car, let's assume it is, what route did it take? Where did it stop? Where did it go? Based on the video, they're saying the car took approximately 19 or 20 minutes, depending on whether you're going there or back. They Google mapped it. They drove it in the middle of the day. What about in the middle of the night when there's no one on the street? How quickly can you get from point A to point B? Can you make a stop? Can someone get in or out of the car? And we don't have any surveillance video that shows who's in the car. We don't know who's driving. We don't know who, if anyone, is in the passenger seat. We don't know if another car came from another direction. There's one screenshot missing from here because it wasn't introduced, but it was testified to. And I asked Detective Petrozello about the BP gas station. Because if you recall, when you're looking at the map of 15 Willowbrook, they're alleging that the car came from essentially the back roads coming from right to left onto 15 Willowbrook. But this way is Route 37, and the BP gas station is here. So I asked Detective Petrozello, is the reason you got this surveillance video because you wanted to see if potentially the McCann, the vehicle that they suspect, right, Paul's loaner vehicle, is coming from this direction? Now, he conceded that there were cars driving past that gas station at that time. But he took no interest in them because it wasn't the McCann. It's just not a full, complete picture. It's not a full story. Why don't we have more surveillance video? It's Ocean Township to Colts Neck. It's 20 minutes, approximately, middle of the day, according to Google Maps. There's different routes. There's various houses and businesses, like in any residential area in Monmouth County. You would expect that if you wanted to follow that car from point A to point B, you would be able to do so. And you would be able to ascertain more information. Or get video from the other side, from the Route 37 side, BP gas station side, and see if any of those cars are leading to 15 Willowbrook. We just don't have that information. We don't know. We have surveillance video. We don't necessarily have answers. Another aspect of a two-person theory is that there were two pairs of jeans in Paul's basement. You only heard about one. You heard about the jeans on the right.
There are two pairs. Is this new evidence?
The lab tested.
I'm going to tell you about something that is not admitted in court.
The lab was able to separate them. The lab wasn't able to separate that second pair. And they never tested it. And Detective Catalona, I asked him, I said, what about the second pair? Because you heard that sometimes the lab doesn't test things, right? There's like a word for it. We have to manage our caseload, and sometimes we can retest it if we're asked. The lab was never asked to test that second pair of jeans. And when I questioned Detective Catalona about it, he wasn't even really aware that it was a second pair of jeans. But
I believe they said
look at them,
it was a single pair.
and you can tell that these are not the same pairs of jeans. They're two different colors to start. You can see the pocket area, and the actual items are in evidence. You can look at them for yourselves. You can examine them. There are two different pairs of jeans. And by the way, we do know that the pants we have, the size is a 34 width, 32 length. At the time that Paul was arrested, the testimony was that he was 5'11" and 230 pounds. That's what was listed on his arrest report. And when Mr. Murray questioned, I think it was Detective Zarilla about it, he was like, well, I didn't actually measure or weigh him. That's what was reported. Okay, but isn't it relevant? I mean, it wasn't in question, right? I mean, if it's reported and it's documented, it's not in question. Why are we saying now, well, we don't really know? What do you mean you don't know? You wrote it in a document. And Detective Catalona, who took the photo of the master bedroom closet, we know from Kitty's testimony, Paul kept his clothes there. Those jeans. There's a rack of jeans in the top right corner of that closet. And I asked Detective Catalona, what about these jeans? Did you collect these jeans? Did you check the size to see if they even matched the size of the jeans that you have? Are they the same? What size are they? What size is Paul? Does anyone care? No.
I think those jeans would have
We
fit
don't
him.
have that information. They didn't collect those jeans. They didn't examine those jeans. They didn't document those jeans. They just assumed. There's also two weapons in this case. There's gunshots and there's stab wounds. And it's an interesting aspect of this case, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Because the state wants you to believe that because Paul is a gun guy, that lends credence to the theory that he did this. Because he owns guns, and he knows how to use them, and he operates them.
The bullets match his gun.
One of our witnesses said he's a gunsmith. I'm sure that'll be brought up. Yeah. Because as that witness also testified, it's a hobby. Paul has a hobby. Everyone knows that. Everyone who knows Paul knows he has guns in his basement.
And knives.
Knows he likes to target shoot and to go to the range, just like anyone else who owns guns. Like the witness who said, I've owned guns myself since I was 18.
Not relevant.
I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but does it make sense that a gun guy would need a second weapon? Wouldn't have bullets? You saw how many bullets are in his basement.
And he forgot to bring the spares.
But just the fact that there's 2 weapons alone. Why? What does that mean? There was an earring mentioned. The earring was found with Jesse's body. Vogt didn't know where it came from, Detective Vogt. He wasn't sure. Dr. Zhang, who did the autopsy, noted it during his direct testimony that it was found. Jesse was 11. There's no testimony that Jesse's ear was pierced at 11 years old. There's no testimony that Paul's ear was pierced and he walked around wearing earrings. Whose earring is it? Why is that earring so close? Whoever that earring belongs to, they're obviously so close to Jesse's body that it was there. Whose is it? There's no testimony about that. There's no information presented from this witness stand about who that earring belonged to. Why are there so many gloves? 6-1-1-2-3-4-1. There's a bunch of gloves in this case. Why? Why are there so many gloves? It's just another fact that you would think one would consider when contemplating a 2-person hypothesis. Now, the next reasonable doubt, number 6, because there's reasonable doubts and there's subcategories of reasonable doubts, is additional lack of investigation and forensic evidence. I'm going to start with the French doors. We know from Detective Brady that there's 3 rear doors, and only one of those doors was brought to his attention was unlocked when the officers got there. The back doors, it was the French doors. The other 2 were locked. Detective Brady says correct. So I asked Detective Catalona, who processed the scene. I want to talk to you about the French doors. They're the French doors, they go into the dining room area, that's correct. So to be clear, your testimony yesterday was that you did or did not process the French doors. I photographed them and then I examined them. So when you observed the French doors, you didn't take any swabs for DNA? No. And then I asked him, were you informed, though, that the first officers on scene indicated that only the French doors were unlocked? No, I have no knowledge of that. So no one told you, hey, pay close attention to those French doors, those were the only back doors unlocked when they first arrived? He looked at me and he said, I'm hearing this for the first time right now. I said, so I'm telling you for the first time now? Yes. You're telling me that the detective who was assigned to process this scene, a very critical scene, it's an arson scene at that point, wasn't told, by the way, these are the only doors in the back that were unlocked, which are the doors right next to where the fire started, by the basement. The French doors are on the right, the sliding doors are after that, and then there's the mudroom door. And when I asked Detective Catalona, like, why didn't you swab it, or even if you didn't know that they were unlocked? And he said something to the effect of, well, look, the doors are kind of damaged. You know, there was maybe... you can always swap. You can always swap, right? You can always try. We were able to get DNA results from charred, melted, burnt jeans. Why not try?
Bloody.
And then I said, and by the way, the inside looks pretty good. Why not try the inside? Why not try? They didn't test the McCann for DNA. Caveat, they did test, I think it was the back license plate for blood, maybe DNA, but not the actual vehicle, not the inside, where someone obviously would have been if they were driving this car. Not the door handles, not the trunk latch, not anywhere where you would expect someone to touch, and even if the person's wearing gloves. We learned about DNA transfer. If there's DNA anywhere on their body, if they touch their hair and then touch their leg or their hand with the glove, I mean, even then, you can always test for DNA. Always. They didn't test the gas can for DNA. I think they blue started and they tried to get fingerprints. We didn't swab it for DNA. Again, just because someone's wearing gloves, or just because someone, doesn't mean that there's no possibility to get DNA off of this item. What if the gas can rubbed against something? Their leg, I don't know, their arm. They didn't test Paul for combustible fluids or gunshot residue. And not a single officer that you heard from that interacted with Paul that day, you heard from Detective Brady, he talked to Paul on scene. You heard from Detective Weisbrot, he talked to Paul on scene with Detective Brady. You heard from Officer Marino, you heard from Officer Redmond, you heard from Officer Bernhard, all of whom had conversations directly with Mr. Caneiro, and it's recorded on body-worn camera. You also heard from Fire Marshal Flanagan, who testified he was inside of a vehicle with Paul, that he went into Paul's vehicle to talk to him. Not a single one of them testified that he smelled like gas, that there were any signs of anything. And Jonathan Harrington, you heard testimony that the neighbors, they were using the neighbors' bathrooms, they were speaking to Marlon Klein, they were speaking to Jonathan Harrington. He didn't say anything either. Katie Caneiro, straight up said, no, my dad didn't smell like gas. Why not test? I asked Detective Catalona that, I think it was. Maybe it was Detective Brady. I think it was Detective Catalona. And they just said, well, you know, it was a few hours later. Okay. Okay. Why not try? There's no testimony that suddenly maybe it starts to dissipate, maybe it's harder to get. Why not try? Don't you want to know? There's footprints. Now, one of them is dried on the wood, and the other is on the stone. The one on the stone is now missing, right? Because it was wet. It was a wet print. We don't know anything about the one on the wood. We don't know the significance. We know that I think Detective Catalona said that he looked at it, he observed it, and it wasn't like unique enough to really compare with anything else. It was like, but it's there, right? Where did it come from? I don't know. What about the one that was wet? Wouldn't a wet footprint that then dries suggest that it was a fresh footprint? Why don't we have a photograph of it? They put a bucket over it hoping it would preserve it, but it didn't. And what's interesting is that these are the stones that lead to around the shed area. And there's a gate there. I remember Detective Catalona, I asked him, I was like, there's another gate. He's like, oh, I don't remember that gate. And then I showed him the photo. And I said, isn't this a gate right here? And he goes, oh, yes, it's a gate. Okay. There's also a front door to the shed and a back door to the shed. When Detective Brady was on the stand, I showed him a video from Detective Redmond's body-worn camera. It might have been a little weird at the time because you're like, why are we looking at this? The reason you're looking at it, the reason I showed it to you, was to show you how dark it was. It was very dark. The video's in evidence. You can see it again. If you recall, you can't see a thing.
You can watch
very
it,
easy
but you can't see anything.
for anyone who's there, two people in baseball caps and dark clothes, to be walking in that area undetected. It's pitch black practically. You can see it in the video. Now there's street lights. There's street lights. So when you're in the street, it's a little easier to see. Not great. It's not very dark out. But here, there was no light. You can see it in the video. Why not do a little bit more to preserve that footprint? Could have been a very important footprint. They also didn't collect any of Paul's shoes or boots. They found, I think, like one boot in the basement or something Detective Cavallona testified to. But what about any of the other shoes in his house? You saw the photos from the 15-year-old Brooke scene, which I'm going to go through a little bit later. It's a bloody scene. Anyone walking around in that area would have blood on their shoes. Why not collect his shoes to see what's going on? There was no testimony about that, no information, other than we didn't do it. You heard about two important tools used by law enforcement. You heard about Blue Star, and you heard about alternative light source, which is ALS. Blue Star is an agent, it's a chemical agent, and it reacts when there's a detected bodily fluid, right? Saliva, or urine, or semen, or blood. And they Blue Starred things to try to see if they could detect blood. Similarly, in ALS is a special light technology where you can see certain fluids that you can't see with the naked eye. They both detect blood. I'm sorry, I think ALS is for bodily fluids and Blue Star is for blood. Either way, they both detect blood.
Details, semantics.
And they Blue Starred a few things, but including the McCann, including the car, which again I'm going to talk about in a little bit, there's no blood in the car. There's no blood in the car. They Blue Starred it, they ALS'd it.
You were just complaining that they didn't swab for DNA there.
But what about the house? What about Mr. Caneiro's house? Don't you want to Blue Star like the sinks and the drains and the showers and the faucets and see if there's any blood being washed off? I mean, again, we're talking about a very bloody scene. You've seen the scene, you've seen the jeans. Wouldn't you want to know, is there blood in his home? Not in the basement where the jeans were found. I mean, in his house, in his bathrooms. Because not a single officer, just like they didn't testify that he smelled like gas, they didn't testify that any blood on him. So, why not check? Don't you want to know to either prove a hypothesis or disprove a hypothesis? And the thing about it is that it's just not that difficult to do. They have the resources. They did it with certain things, but they chose not to do it in other areas like his home. What we do know is that Canine Creed put a great resume. Mr. Murray went through that with him. A great resume of detecting human remain scent, including blood scent. They walked him all throughout that house, and he didn't alert to anything. And maybe that's the reason why they said, well, there was no alert, we're not going to test it. I mean, he also explained I'm just a tool, right? A reliable tool, sure, but still worth double checking. So, regardless, he did not alert to any blood anywhere else in the house, just in the basement where the items were found. Except, he did alert, I think I'm going to talk about it later, he did alert, I think, toward the back of the car, which is why they tested the license plate.
She keeps talking about
That
later.
was ultimately negative. The dog was wrong about that. But he wasn't really wrong because, if you recall, there was a photograph of Paul, who had gotten blood work that day, had a little bandage in the car of blood. That was, I think, removed at that point. So I don't know. I'm not an expert. But it's possible that the dog was smelling that blood, and that's why the dog alerted. There's no blood found in the car, on the car, anything like that. They didn't measure the McCann driver's seat. They're on scene. There's many officers. There's multiple detectives. You can easily measure Paul. You have his height. If you don't want to trust what he says, you can measure him. Meaning the detectives at the time.
Yeah, the jury's not going to be able to do that.
How far is that seat from that gas pedal? Does it make sense? Who was driving the car?
For the stupor sticker?
Is it too long for his leg? Is it too short for his leg? Is it just right for his leg? We don't know. It wasn't measured. And it might seem like a little thing. These all might seem, I don't know, little things, medium things, but they add up. They add up to real investigation. What I'm going to talk about in a little bit is that this case relies heavily on science. It relies on arson, ballistics, and DNA. But science only tells you the what. It doesn't tell you the who, it doesn't tell you the where, it doesn't tell you the why, and it doesn't tell you the how.
Science tells us the where.
Tells you that. Just because we have access to science and forensics doesn't mean we forego basic investigation. But that's what was done here.
Thank you, Bree, for 5 gifted
Mr.
memberships.
Murray asked about a handicap placard. Mr. Caneiro is disabled, you know that, or he's on disability. He has a handicap placard in the car. It's there on the 19th, and it's missing from the photo on the 20th. Mr. Murray showed those photos to Detective Weisbrot. Why was it moved, is the question. Why was it moved? Is it because someone who's not used to it being there drove the car and removed it because it was in the way? They didn't like it there? I don't know.
Or because it's the law, you have to remove it when you drive.
Where did it go and why was it moved? This was a question we asked multiple officers who were on scene at 15 Willowbrook. We have video from outside of the home before the murders, just before the murders, and we see a figure outside of the garage. We see a person there. And you can see through the frosted glass window the approximate height of that person. Why not take a measurement? How tall is that third pane here? Not a single detective or officer can tell us. Why not recreate it? They recreated the backlight. Why not recreate putting a person there and seeing where their head falls and how tall they are? And do a spectrum, do a scale. And does it match Mr. Caneiro's height of 5'11"? I mean, that's a simple investigation task that could be performed by anyone. Why not do it? Now, recognize that a big part of their case is going to be this video. The video is turned off, according to them, at approximately 1:30 in the morning in Mr. Caneiro's garage. Now that video, you do see Mr. Caneiro in that video.
Yep, we do.
And
Naked.
the theory
Naked.
is that he turned it off because then all these crimes ensued. Right? That's the theory.
He was supposed to be sleeping.
Did anyone testify to that? No. But what we do know is that Officer Bernhardt asks Mr. Caneiro about the cameras. Do you have them running right now? And Paul says, I've been having problems with stuff in the garage. And Officer Bernhardt says, you've been having some problems with stuff in the garage? And Paul says, yeah, I have a ticket open actually with one of the companies. And then Bernhardt says to another officer, he says he's been having problems with his cameras recently. Now that's not what he said. But the reason why that's important is because it generates the origin of this suspicion. It generates the origin of this relayed information that Mr. Caneiro is saying he's been having problems with his cameras and that's why they're not working. But that's not accurate. And the problem is that there was no follow-up to it at that time. Throughout the course of the testimony, I asked a bunch of different officers about access points. You've heard that word. And I said, do you know whether this is an access point? Do you know whether that's an access point? Do you know whether that's an access point? No one knew. No one knew what an access point was. No one knew anything about that, let alone whether it contributed to an issue with the Wi-Fi. But we do know that there's an access point right above that DVR in the garage. And we do know that Katie testified that just a couple days before that, Paul was trying to fix an issue with the Wi-Fi. We also know from the testimony, because I don't know exactly how they're going to characterize it, but if they do characterize it as he turned off his cameras, that's not what we see. What we see is a video of Mr. Caneiro approaching that area, and then it cuts out. And I asked pretty much any officer that was on scene, how was it plugged in? Was the DVR system, like, was it attached to an extension cord? Was it the extension cord that was turned off? Was it the power strip? Is that where the outlets? Detective Catalona, who took photos of the scene, we don't have any photos of the outlets or the wires or the wiring or anything. We have body-worn camera footage of the removal of the DVR, and it takes approximately 7.5 minutes for the DVR to be removed because there's so many different wires. And you can see the officer pulling out the wires. I showed you this video. We also know that there's a computer in the basement. I asked Detective Catalona about that. That appears to be a computer. That appears to be another screen, a tablet. And then when he testified about a glove, I said, take another look. Isn't that a glove on a keyboard next to the computer? He said, oh yeah, looks like a keyboard. The state, I suspect, is going to tell you, well, the DVR system was hardwired. It doesn't affect the Wi-Fi, or it's not affected by the Wi-Fi. First of all, says who? Says who? The only person that testified to that was Detective Weisbrot, who's like, well, it's my understanding that it wouldn't affect it. He wasn't speaking as an expert or from first-hand experience. You didn't hear from anyone that said that at all. And in fact, Dr. Gould testified. Who installed your cameras, your surveillance system? He says, I did the actual installation of the cameras, and I did the hard wiring of all of the coaxial cables to the main DVR that I had set up. Unfortunately, once I had set it all up, I couldn't get it to stream through the router, the modem. I just couldn't get it to actually work, so I contacted Paul and had him come over to do the internet protocols or whatever needed so that I could stream it through the firewall. I asked him, was there any type of system that he put in place for you along the way? He said he did an external hard, I guess it would be a router firewall that I had Square One manage just so I didn't have to worry about anything happening to my system. Unfortunately, I didn't understand how it worked. He did. So I would always have him take care of any problems that occurred, and one of them was trying to get the video cameras to work. Was there something with an acronym that he used? He set up a DDNS, and I know it has something to do with changing IP addresses, but I don't understand it. He did. Okay, so you mentioned you don't understand it. Is this something that's simple or more complex? To me, it was complex. And did Paul ever set up any access points in your house anywhere? He set up an access point over our garage, but it was too far away from the antennas for our router, and this way my wife had her office there, and it allowed us to have better internet access at the end of the house. Now, this doesn't explain everything, but it does demonstrate that this is complicated. It's not as simple as, oh, well, this has wires and Wi-Fi doesn't, so therefore it's no impact. Where's the expert testimony to say that? I mean, it's simply, you can tell that it's complicated. And Detective Brady testified that when he spoke to Paul and Paul was trying to explain it to him, he didn't really understand it either. And I think I asked him, like, sounds pretty technical. And Detective Brady said, yeah, it was. Now, Detective Brady is a detective and he does not have body-worn camera attached to him. But there's many other officers on scene that did. And if Detective Brady, with all of his years of law enforcement training and experience, had said, hey, buddy, come over here, I want to record, just stand here while I have this conversation with Mr. Caneiro while he explains the issues he's having with his Wi-Fi, record it. Maybe we would have a memorialization of that explanation. We don't have that. But the fact that a system is hardwired doesn't mean, in and of itself, that it's not affected by the Wi-Fi or that it doesn't affect the Wi-Fi. And similarly, the fact that the screen cuts out doesn't mean that cameras were shut off. There's many potential explanations there. As far as power strip, an outlet, a wire,
that would be shut off.
We don't know. We also know, though, that on the 19th,
did they send an alert saying they lost power?
Seeking assistance. He's discussing access points. He's discussing an issue with his firewall. And evidence. This is consistent with what he is telling the police. This is consistent with what he explained, or what Katie explained to you about issues with the Wi-Fi. Now I want to talk about the timeline at 15 Willowbrook. This is the timeline. I know we kind of wrote it down. There's an exhibit, but I decided to make it a little clearer. At 2:07, there's a vehicle leaving 27 Tilton, which is the Lonerman camp. At 2:27, there's a vehicle that arrives at 15 Willowbrook. At 2:35 a.m., that's when the garage lights turn on and we saw the figure outside of the frosted window. The Nest video at 2:51 ends and all cameras stop. I want to focus you on that timeline right there for a second at 16 minutes. Because from 2:35 to 2:51, that's when you see the garage lights and a person kind of going back and forth, and the state's going to argue. There's the electric meter on one side, there's the generator on the other side, and what the person is doing is they're disconnecting one and then flipping the switch to the other. And what they're arguing in the same breath is that Mr. Caneiro knows how to do these things. That he knows how to use the generator. That he knows what switch to turn off. That he knows how to access the electrical meter, which are, by the way, both on the outside of the house. Anyone can see them. And they're going to say, Mr. Caneiro has specialized knowledge and experience with Keith's home. He has intimate familiarity with it. He's the one that would be able to turn off the generator and disconnect the electrical meter. Okay. Then why does it take 16 minutes? Why does it take 16 minutes to disconnect an electrical meter and flip a switch on a generator that he had knowledge of? 16 minutes? Someone who's familiar with the generator and knows exactly which switch to flip takes 2 seconds. We're flipping a switch. We're pressing a button. You heard the testimony. There's like 3 different switches on the generator. One was turned off by the first responders, but one wasn't. Okay. 16 minutes for that. And then you have the electrical meter. Something is twisted off the panel, and then it's disconnected. I don't know how long that takes, but I submit that someone who knows and is familiar, intimately familiar, like they might argue, wouldn't take them 16 minutes to do that. But perhaps someone who is less familiar, it would. 2:52 is when the power goes out. There's a loss of power on the Verizon ONT. Between 3:14 and 3:18, Keith's phone texts Paul's phone. At 3:18, Rob Block is alerted that the servers are down. 3:26, between 3:26 and 3:31, Dennis Kapora hears gunshots and calls 911. Now, it's unclear, obviously. We don't know exactly what time he called. He couldn't even tell you. He said something in the 20s, but earlier, originally, he said 3:26, 3:27. But the CAD report says 3:31, 3:33. Either way. Why are we fighting over minutes? Why is it such a big deal? Because, and why won't the officers concede the time? Because they know how important these minutes are. Why? Because it is a very tight timeline for one person to accomplish all of this. Because Keith is still alive at 3:18 when he's texting. And at 3:26 to 3:31 is when the gunshots are heard. Presumably, that is when Keith is shot. So that leaves, if it's 3:31 to the time that the vehicle leaves, a very short amount of time. If it's 3:26, it's an extra 5 minutes. Still a very short amount of time. Because if Keith was shot first, and then the rest of the family is murdered, that's the time frame. And I want to zero in on the 3:42 to the 3:48. Because at 3:42 is when the Verizon Fios optical network is out. What does that mean? From the testimony, it's when the Verizon cable in the basement is cut. And the reason why that's important is because that is tied to the fire alarm system. And so we know that the fire would have had to been set after that is cut. Otherwise, the alarm would go off, the smoke alarm or the heat alarm or whatever it is. So that's 6 minutes. 6 minutes from the Verizon Fios optical line being severed. We know it was cut. You saw a photo. There was testimony. To the vehicle leaving on video from the Area 15 Willowbrook.
That's plenty of time.
6 minutes is not a lot of time. Detective Petrozello, I asked him about his testimony under oath at the grand jury. You testified that at about 3:42 a.m. is when that fiber optic line appeared to have been cut. Is that correct? Correct. So then I asked him, so you testified under oath that about 3:42 a.m. is when it appeared that the line was cut. Do you disagree with your testimony? No. From 3:42, which is about when the Verizon Fios line was cut, is how long? 6 minutes. Detective Cordoma.
Lori, thank you very much.
That there was a Verizon line that was cut. Yes.
12 months on the jury.
That's what enables the smoke alarm detector that would have went off. I believe so. Would you agree that the fire would have started after the Verizon line was cut, because otherwise the alarm would have gone off and we would have known a lot sooner about the start of the fire? Yes. I think he continued to talk a little bit after that, but the answer is yes. So, Mr. Murray asked a lot of questions about trying to walk this distance. So to put it into perspective, the reason why we're asking these questions is because in 6 minutes, according to their theory, one person cut the Verizon line in the basement of the 15 Willowbrook home and then started a fire and then left the house.
That happened first.
Ran across that area to wherever the car was parked, which we know wasn't in the driveway because we would have seen it pull in the driveway on surveillance. It must have parked somewhere down the road, either on the road or possibly down that driveway. We don't know. How long does it take to get from point A to point B? How long does it take to get from the basement to the top of the stairs and to start a fire? And by the way, we don't even know how that fire was started.
Where all the alcohol
was?
was?
It started in the cedar closet, in the basement. That we know. But the testimony from Detective Cordoma was they tested for accelerants and it was negative. Now, just because it was negative doesn't mean they can rule out that an accelerant wasn't used, because it's possible that the accelerant got burned up in the fire and they found a liquor bottle in the closet. And they said, well, that's a little odd. Like, maybe that's what started it.
Little 90 proof.
On cross-examination, I asked him, doesn't your report say you also found 3, fire strikers? 3 of them in the closet? He was like, oh yeah, we found that too. Okay, what is that? Isn't that like a thing that you use it's a dry mechanism to start a fire? Maybe we've seen it before on like a TV show or something where they use them a lot in the woods. And his answer was
I think it was for welding.
I'm paraphrasing, but he was basically like, I'm not really sure. Okay, so you can't say that it was a flammable, combustible liquid because it's negative, but you're not ruling it out because there's a liquor bottle. But have we considered that there's no flammable liquid because they used a fire starter, a dry fire starter? And how long does that take? Because if that's how they started the fire, in 6 minutes, and there's no blood in the car, how does that happen? This photo has trees in it because this is obviously like a Google Map image, but this image was taken from the day. This is from November 20th of 2018. And you can see the layout of the house. What door did they come out of? There's an unlocked door, there's an open door in the back. What happened to that? Did they go from the basement out the back door? Is that a theory? How long does that take? How far is it? This is another aerial image.
We give him a break at 11.
5 more minutes.
Now, we heard testimony from both Boris Wolstein, who's a 911 caller. He lives at that house there at the top left of the screen. He's the neighbor that called 911. He said that he saw smoke coming from the back of Keith's house and he thought maybe Keith was burning leaves because there's a place to burn things in the back of Keith's house. Obviously that wasn't the case, but that was his initial assumption. So you can burn things in the back of the house. I asked Mr. Wolstein about, he lives in the area. I asked him about lakes, bodies of water in the area. He told us about some, about when you drive and you make if you're coming out of the driveway of 15 Willowbrook and you make a right and you go through the back roads, which is the exact route, the back roads way that the state is alleging Mr. Caneiro took, you pass over a few brooks, a couple brooks. There's Willowbrook, there's Hot Brook, and then I asked Mr. Goldstein about this. Mr. Murray asked Detective Zerillo about this. There is a swimming river reservoir. And the road is it's a 2-lane road, and the testimony explained that it's like very close to the water. Anyone, if they wanted to get rid of evidence, could toss it out the window. There's a body of water behind the house. There's a place to burn things behind the house. There's random bodies of water to toss evidence. But the state is alleging that Mr. Caneiro took it back with him to his house. Now I'm going to talk about the no blood in the Porsche Macan.
Wayne, welcome. Thank you very much for your continued
I don't
support.
have to go through all of these. You know, these photos are devastating.
We don't have to go through all of these. This is true. We might see pictures that
They're horrible.
are pretty rough on the screen.
But I showed them because you have to see how bloody that scene is. And you have to see how bloody the jeans are. And you'll have the ability to do that. These photos are in evidence. I don't need to show them all. But there's a lot of blood. Just like there's a lot of blood all over that kitchen, all over the scene. And there is not a drop of blood in that car. How is that possible? How is that possible?
Michael Trowbridge.
And how does that fit into the timeline?
OG. 26 months on the jury.
Why aren't we
Thank you
worried
very
about
much.
this? There's another timeline now from 27 Tilton Drive. Now the vehicle arrives at 27 Tilton at 4:07 a.m. Then we have 4:30 a.m. and approximately 4:30 a.m. the men. 4:54, Paul's phone is unplugged, according to the extraction report. 4:57, there's a flash of fire at the corner of the house. That's the main fire. And I want to know, because that view, it's from the back of Mr. Caneiro's house. And what you can see is like the flash, it lights up, right? So that means, presumably, that at 4:57 is when there was like a giant burst of flames. Because you see the light on the video. You don't see the actual fire, you see the light. But that doesn't mean that someone wasn't there earlier, starting at 4:30 in the morning, trying to light a fire. Lighting a smaller fire. Perhaps a fire that's not large enough to be visible on that video.
A dark fire. Josh Hutchins, thank you very much. 24 months as an attorney.
At some
one of our
point,
great mods as well.
gasoline is presumably poured down this basement window, and that's when there's a giant flame. But what happens between 4:30 and 4:57? Are people using fire strikers to try to light a fire? I don't know. It's possible. At 4:59, now this is the most important part of this timeline.
Here's the timeout.
At 4:59, approximately 4:59:58, tried to get the timestamps right, might be off by a few milliseconds. The Porsche Cayenne backs out of the garage and pulls onto the street. Okay. Now that is Mr. Caneiro pulling his car out of the driveway so that when the fire alarm went off and he got his family out of the home, they could all meet inside of the car. It's November, it's close to December, it's close to Thanksgiving, and it's dark out and it's cold, and they don't have shoes on. Of course he's like, let me get a car so we can all sit in it. And he chooses the biggest car that they own, which is the Porsche Cayenne. Now you also heard, I didn't include it here, it just happened the other day, but Katie testified. She testified that what happened was she gets awoken, right? She comes downstairs, and as she's stepping outside of her home, she looks back to see where her parents are. And she sees her dad, Mr. Paul Caneiro, going toward the garage. Okay? She comes outside. She starts to call 911, so it's like 4:58. She sees her dad. She sees the light on the garage, which she explains means the door's coming up, the garage door's coming up, so the light's illuminated, and the vehicle's pulling out. I said, how long, how much time passed from the time that you looked behind you and saw your dad going toward the garage to the time that you stepped out of the house and saw the garage door coming up and the car pulling out? And she said, under a minute. And she was still on the phone with 911. Short call. I asked her, did you ever see your dad with the gas can? No. Did you ever see your dad try to start any fires? No. She's standing there. She's looking at the area of the garage. Now, the car pulls out, and it's a minute and 28 seconds later that you see the garage fire start, that you see the garage fire light up on surveillance video. These are still shots.
Wayne Hatchell,
it's a little hard to see.
Much.
I'm going to play the video since it's only a minute and a half.
Oh, gee, 35
The first image is, you can see at the top right, it's the Porsche Cayenne pulling out of the driveway. And at 5:01 a.m. is the flash of light. That's the garage fire. Now, Mr. Murray asked one of the detectives, who said something about, it looked like gasoline was thrown on the hood of the Porsche Macan. And he said, okay, if someone threw the gasoline on the Porsche Macan, wouldn't that mean that there's someone there to throw it? And he answered yes. That's what that would mean. Okay. So my question is, how is Mr. Caneiro pulled out of his driveway in front of his house with his family in the car? How is he simultaneously there, and a minute and a half later, also simultaneously lighting a fire by the garage? How is he doing that? How is he in two places at once? I'm going to play the video.
We're going to take the break now. So, Mr. Decker, can you move the... ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the break now. You've been at it for almost 2.5 hours. We'll take a break, we'll come back at 11:15, and we'll continue with the summation of the defense. Obviously, you have not heard all of the summations. You have not heard my charge. You go in there, take your break, relax. Don't discuss this case. Don't do any research. We'll have you back at 11:15. Thank you.
So the judge lets the jury out of the room. When he says, you've been at it for 2.5 hours, he's talking to the defense. They have been going and going like the Energizer Bunny. They've got pins in about 24 different topics that we're going to talk about later, slowly getting around to them. It looks like this will be a defense day. I think, chronologically, I think they're getting close to the end. They probably will be done right around lunchtime is my idea. No, she's not done. She's not done. 2.5 hours in. It's the filibuster defense is what they're going for right now. And it's taken quite a while. Little update in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Yeah, we can speed it up. Is it slow? Give me a second. Nancy Guthrie investigation, TMZ is reporting that they received another note, a third note. And I'm hearing rumors that it says something about they're asking for a single Bitcoin in return for a name of someone who's involved, which is just weird. Because you would think that the kidnapper who made the demand would be the same person. And they've dropped it from, what, how much did they want before? Like 100 Bitcoins or something. It was some crazy amount, down to a single Bitcoin, which is still, 60,000, 70,000 $70,000 from 6 mil to 7. It's 1% is what it is. You know, it's tiny. So, or less. Anyway, we'll see what happens. The one is turning on the other. There are 2 people involved. I know that. We saw that from the pictures yesterday. So maybe one person is turning the other person on. If that's the case, I'm thinking that sadly that Nancy is not going to be found alive. All right. So where was slow mode? Where were we at? You wanted to slow it down or speed it up? Did you want to speed up, chat? Can we let chat speed up a bit? Yeah, for sure. It's basically slow mode's turned off. You can chat every 10 seconds. If you're talking more than that, you need to listen a little bit. So if that, read some other people's comments and then respond. No, the request now is to tell the FBI where Nancy is and they can ID the kidnapper.
It's not your turn to talk. I'll tell you when you can talk.
Who are you saying the request is from? TMZ just got another note in the last half hour, is what we're hearing. And you say the note is to tell the FBI where Nancy is, and they can ID the kidnapper. I'll have to look into that. I think I missed something in the wording there. 84 Bitcoins is 6 million. The number changes constantly. Did they get $300 or 300 Bitcoin? I think it was $300 was what was placed in the account. I think that was last night, before they announced the arrest of a person of interest who was a delivery driver out, I guess, doing deliveries at the time he got pulled over and arrested. And he's already been released and I believe cleared. So let's see. Let me check and see what the latest is. This was just breaking a few minutes ago. So all right, the latest we have on Nancy Guthrie. Just don't trust some of these. Some of these links are crazy. Bum, 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 bum. Makes no sense. He could have got the $50,000 reward. Well, a single Bitcoin's more than 50,000, so it's asking for more than the reward. Let's see what TMZ has posted. TMZ says, this was within the last hour, TMZ receives a new Nancy Guthrie note and the sender demands 1 Bitcoin in exchange for info on the kidnapping suspect. So that's they're asking for 1 Bitcoin and they let you know who the suspect is. Laura says, I'd accept half a Bitcoin. I'm not fussy. Katrina, refresh your screen. It's YouTube. YouTube's been having issues. Just reload your browser or go out and come back in. It should fix it. Crazier Cat, I'm an MG yet, middle G. Gallery, 6 months. Crazier Cat, thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. They're saying Bitcoin now is 56,000. Did it just drop suddenly? Let me check what Bitcoin's at right now. It's at $66,818.20 is what I'm seeing. So that's my current. That's the Bitcoin I currently own is at that price. So depends on which Bitcoin you choose. There's only one Bitcoin. There are many different cryptocurrencies, but math's not mathing on this case. Bitcoin is on sale right now. Huge sale. I'm not saying it's going to go back up again, but it is on sale. I'm not giving financial advice. Yeah, 66.6K. Coincidence? I think not. Bitcoin has dropped a lot. It was over 100,000 at one point, not too long ago this year. Well, it might have been last year. Asking for a friend, what is the tax rate on ransom? 100%, greeners. When they find you, they will take it all. I keep getting text messages that I'm making Bitcoin purchases. Am I inadvertently funding the ransom? No, surely not. You're probably getting scam emails that are trying to steal your money by saying, oh, a purchase was made from your account. Click here. Well, it wasn't you. Do these steps to reverse it, and that's how they steal your money. If you don't have a Bitcoin wallet or some setting, Coinbase account or something like that, you've never worked with Bitcoin, I would just delete those messages and never even read them. Let's see. The letter had an actual address. Harvey Levin said he turned it over to the FBI. I left here and watched him. Senator claims they've tried unsuccessfully to reach Savannah Guthrie's brother and her sister by email and text. All right. Sorry. We need a sarcasm font is what we need, surely. Surely not. We need a sarcasm font. That way I can not take things literally. Let's see. My husband got scammed out of $16,000 Bitcoin scam. Oh, man, that's terrible. Laura says, why Bitcoin and not $50,000 cash? Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that is able to be transferred in ways that money is more difficult to move. Bitcoin can be moved around the world in moments and super fast. I don't realize cash can transfer as well, but cash is slower and more cumbersome. Sending a wire transfer is more cumbersome than zipping Bitcoin around the world. And it's more difficult to trace Bitcoin, I think. How many times do you have to transfer Bitcoin before it becomes untraceable? Are you talking about blending Bitcoin? Because every transaction of Bitcoin is stored in a ledger. That ledger is part of what's called the blockchain, which is the history of everything that ever was Bitcoin. So everything is discoverable. Everything can be found. Now, if you put $100 of Bitcoin into account and you mix in, $100 from here and $100 from here, and then you take $100 out, you've got $300 went in and $100 that went out. Which $100 went out? I mean, that can be a legitimate question, but the transaction itself would all be able to be viewed. Bitcoin can be discovered when the person collecting the money has to provide an idea. That's if they're transferring the money to someone who requires an ID. Because Bitcoin to Bitcoin, wallet to wallet does not require that. There are ways to transfer Bitcoin, and if you're transferring it for something, if you're not cashing out through a traditional method, you're basically laundering the Bitcoin. There are ways to do it. Let's see. Money laundering 101. Yeah. Don't do it is my recommendation. Is this a mercy break? Yes, the judge did feel sorry for the jurors and let them go for a little bit. They'll be back in just a few minutes. This is their 11 o'clock break. They have one every morning, but she has been talking for 2.5 hours. Defense is going first in this case, which means prosecution goes last. They each get one shot. Usually, they're both given equal time. I cannot see prosecution using 2.5 hours on this one. If the prosecution uses 2.5 hours, they're admitting that this is an extremely complex case that the jurors just don't understand. And I don't think they want to do that. I think they want to say this doesn't take all day to figure out. It's actually very simple. The evidence is very clear, and here it is. And this is why you should find him guilty. I think that's what they need to do. I don't think they need to try to counter every point she's raised and, there's actually 2 pairs of pants, and I don't think they need to address all of that. It's like, this is why. This is your timeline. These are the facts that matter. And this is why he's guilty. So you can't pay your bills through Bitcoin, right? There are some companies that do accept Bitcoin as payment. There's some businesses that do. I don't know of like utilities that do right now. But I guess they could in theory. Can you explain why transferring money is slower? I think transferring money is clunkier. It definitely has IRS reporting rules that kick in over certain amounts. If you're trying to move over $10,000 from one bank account to the other, the IRS is going to be notified about that transaction here in the U.S. Right now, it's just in the blockchain, and they call it a whale. When you move a bunch of Bitcoin from one place to another, whale transfers. Question is, can you staple a Bitcoin and then wash it and dry it, and then it doesn't mold? You cannot. It's all virtual. Let's see. This is why scammers often ask for gift cards. They're less traceable than Bitcoin. Scammers who ask for Bitcoin usually transfer to gift cards. Gift cards are small potatoes. Most gift cards do not come in the amounts that Bitcoin scams can reach. Bitcoin can be millions and millions and millions of dollars. On a daily basis, there are tens of millions of dollars in Bitcoin transferred between one wallet to another that we just don't know who it is. It's just out there. There's so much money moves around in Bitcoin, and try to move $10 million from an account to another. It takes like 4 accountants and 6 banks. Let's see. $9K is the new norm. Okay, I'm going to have to change the amount. No, just kidding. Yes. Intentionally breaking down a transaction, a large transaction, to an amount under the reporting threshold is frowned upon by the IRS. I would not recommend doing that. I have an option to have a portion of my paycheck paid in Bitcoin. I would say that if you are bullish on Bitcoin, if you think that Bitcoin is going to stick around for a long time, the value is going to increase over time, that is basically, if you're confident and you're right, that would be giving yourself a raise by accepting it in Bitcoin. If, on the other hand, Bitcoin is a fad and it passes and it dwindles down to nothing, you're basically giving away free money or giving away hard-earned money. So now I have to change how I pay the mods. Yeah, sorry, under 9,000 from now on. What about Sovsits? Think of Bitcoin. Sovsits have a hard time just describing who they are. So we're all going to digital currency one day. I think that is the trend, for sure. I like the idea of digital currency. With cash transactions, in many situations they're reversible. You can claw back money if something goes wrong or if it's sent to the wrong bank. With Bitcoin, it's done. It's gone. It's moved, and it's probably moved again after that. There's no wait, edit, undo. Oops, I sent it to the wrong address. There's a finality with Bitcoin that is quite appealing for some people. might be coming back to court here in just a second. Banks are required to report IRS any deposit. I was, when I worked for the Department of Defense with the security clearance that I had, which was top secret SCI, I was under 24/7 financial watch, which means that it wasn't like a $10,000. They just knew everything all the time that my banks were doing, that my bank accounts were doing. And if I ever did move money, I had to tell them first and say, hey, we crashed our car, or a car broke down. We have to buy another one. We've got a savings amount here. We're going to move here. I'd have to literally go to my work and say, hey, I'm going to be moving some money. Just heads up. It's all good. Here's where it came from. I'm glad I'm not under that monitoring anymore. Not that it would do me any good. I don't move money much. If somehow your Bitcoin is lost electronically, you are out. I think what you're talking about there, 130 MKY, is that 130 MK is that Bitcoin address is basically a series of numbers and letters, or like a hexadecimal address. If you forget where it's at, or more importantly, you forget the access codes, your password and your phrase keys, your safety mechanism to get access back into it, there's no way to recover that. It's gone. It's now become, it's sitting in what's called a dead wallet that no one can move and no one can access. You can't. It's not something you can hire a safe cracker to break the encryption and get access to it. It's just gone. And there's a lot of Bitcoin that's in dead wallets. What percentage? I heard this the other day. I think Ayden was talking to me about the percentage that's estimated to be unrecoverable, but it's large and it's growing, because with every transfer to the wrong address, or with every lost password, or destroyed hard wallet or something, I don't know. It just gets bigger. Wait till YouTube accepts Bitcoin for super chats. I think the problem with the Bitcoin not being accepted readily by other companies right now is the volatility of the Bitcoin itself. So if you say, hey, I'm selling cables and I accept US dollars and Bitcoin, you say, if you buy this cable, it costs it's an expensive cable, $66,000 for a cable. Or if you want to buy it in Bitcoin, that'll be 1 Bitcoin. Well, later today, a Bitcoin might be worth 65,000. Or it might be worth 68,000. And I would constantly have to be fluctuating my price on the Bitcoin side to make sure that I'm still at market value, or even pad my numbers so that if it does dip a little bit, I can adjust the pricing before somebody gets a really good deal on Bitcoin. Say Bitcoin just plummets, drops down to $10, and suddenly I've sold my $60,000 cable for $10. So you need a company that is able to manage that risk and that the flexibility of the Bitcoin to do that. Isn't that what they call Bitcoin mining? Bitcoin mining is when you set up hardware, computer hardware, to process and hash the algorithm, basically the math behind Bitcoin, and it looks for the new block in the blockchain. It's basically you're working on a math problem, and a bunch of computers are trying to complete it, and the first one to get there, or the one to discover it, gets rewarded for discovering it by being gifted Bitcoin. I forget what the amount is, but it's like over 100,000, I think, dollars. And but it's so difficult that millions of people are trying to do it, or millions of computers are trying to do it, and only one wins every 10 minutes. Mining takes a ton of energy, interesting if you ever get into cryptocurrency. I'm not. I'm just on the fringes. But Greener says, I have a third of a Bitcoin in an unrecoverable wallet, but I would have sold it long ago if I knew the password. Bought around 300. Wow. Yeah, just stop looking at that. Stop looking at that. It'll just make you sick as the price goes up. Cryptocurrency sounds risky. It is extremely risky, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And I group myself in that category. Understand it very well, because showing the wrong person your screen can give them all your money very easily. keep my money safely hidden in Venmo. I use Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, all the big ones. I think I even signed up for the one that Mr. Beast just bought last week. It's useful to be able to transfer money because my kid's in college and was like, hey, his birthday comes up. I'm like, hey, get yourself something for your birthday. I can zip money to him very easily without having to try to do a wire transfer to his bank or mail a check or something. Okay. Don't know why 25-year-old me thought I would never forget things, passwords I memorized. Greeners, maybe you need to hire a hypnotist that you really trust and see if they can put you in a deep hypnosis and recall your password from yesteryear. All right, we should be coming back any minute now. The judge gave him a break at 11. It's now 11:27. Well, it was a few minutes after 11, so I think we're about 20 minutes into our 15-minute break. Dale Warner, isn't that one only showing the openings and closings? They're not streaming the middle, Winter Libby? I thought that's what I heard last. I also heard there might be a plea deal, but I don't know. That's always a rumor. The big trial we have coming up next is the one that's currently in jury selection, which is Corey Richens. We've got everything lined up for that to begin. It's slated to begin in under 2 weeks, so we're probably not going to take another big trial. By big trial, I mean month-long trial. Between now and then. How easy is it to purchase Bitcoin? Extremely easy, especially if you use one of the applications that are on smartphones like, let's see. I have, I think Venmo. Does Venmo let you do it? Yeah, Venmo lets you buy crypto. Cash App, I think, definitely lets you buy crypto. Coinbase is sort of crypto-focused. Ember Weevil. A bunch. Don't you have e-transfer? Yes, we do. It's in jury selection? Yes, it is. They started yesterday, I believe. The plea was rejected. Okay, thank you, Josh. Only openings and closings for the Warner trial. If I remember right, the other family members, this was like a whole bunch of family involved, right? The other family members, the audio was terrible or the video was terrible in the trial. I don't remember if it's the same trial. Borrow versus stole money is like pledged versus donate. Yes, knitting with me, correct. I love the reference to the Amber Heard trial and Johnny Depp. Paul was pledging to pay back everything he borrowed from Keith without Keith's permission. Tarkin, a lot of people staying away from cryptocurrency because it's different, because it's new, and because it's very different. And the argument is that it's not backed by anything, right? It's not backed by the good faith and credit of the United States. It's not backed by gold or some other hard asset, kept in a vault somewhere that shows that you can transfer your crypto for something that's tangible. It's just faith. It's a different trial. Okay. Had my comment repeat? It does it. YouTube does that sometimes. It's not FDIC insured. No backing whatsoever. Yeah. The understanding public and private keys is very important for Bitcoin. Like I could show a QR code on my screen here live, and people anywhere in the world could instantly just send money to to my Bitcoin wallet. But if I showed the wrong QR code or the key, anyone could take the money from my wallet just with that information. You got to be careful what you give out. They wouldn't get much because they don't have much, but we do have movement. We have the judge. No audio yet. I think he's asking how much longer are you going to take, because we only have till March 20th, and at this rate, the jury is going to get a little sick of it. I can send them out, give them a breaks occasionally, but just trying to read lips here. No. These cameramen, they've got other trials they need to watch. These other attorneys, they've got other trials. How long are you going to take? Yeah. Hope he tells her to speed it up. Yeah, there was some of this. Come on. let's get moving. But I do like this judge as well. She did say she was going to circle back to several topics. If she keeps her word, we have a few items more to talk about. We do want to hear. Judge is still on break. The rules of the court is that when the judge is not seated on the bench, we are not supposed to hear any audio. That's usually a standard court decorum order for the media. That when the judge is not seated on the bench, we get no audio. So with him standing behind the chair, it's like, well, are you just standing up to stretch, or is this like saying you can't record me yet? Now, there's no sound yet. Break is still on. Yes, I will check out the picture on Discord. Thank you. What in the world? I don't even know what I'm looking at. Something AI for sure. Might have to translate this. It's supposed to be a sluice box for prospecting based on the title. Yeah, AI got that one wrong. Here we go. Sound. We got sound. Jury's coming in.
Can you just move that to the
No,
side
they
for now,
don't.
so it's not in front of.
Looks like we're letting everybody in back from the break. You know what's funny? I'm still like a couple minutes behind, and I could have fast forwarded then. I'm sorry. All right. Apparently, everyone left to grab snacks and is now filing back into the courtroom. Quite the crowd there showing up. It looks like it's almost standing room only.
Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to bring everyone back in to let you know what's going on right this minute. So we're having an IT issue. So we're going to try to fix that IT issue right now before we continue on with the summations. So what I'm doing is that I've just allowed the jury to go to lunch. They're going to come back at 12:30. So instead of lunch from 12:30 to 1:30, it's actually 11:30 to 12:30. So we're staying on track for the day. But I wanted to bring you in respectfully to let you hear it from me that that's exactly what we're doing. It's an IT issue. We'll start back up at 12:30. Please be here at 12:30 because, again, I locked the doors. And it's no disrespect to anyone. I just want to make sure that the jury is completely focused on Ms. Mastalone's summation, Mr. Decker's summation, and that we don't have any issues. So I'll see everybody back right at 12:30. We'll start, and we'll go from there. Thank you all. Thank you.
I think we're having what's called an ID10T issue. ID10T is the issue. I think we've located the problem, and it's sitting between the chair and the keyboard. I don't know. Somebody screwed something up, but what that means is we're going to lunch. What time did he say we're coming back? We're going to lunch, and we'll be back with more prosecution or more defense. They did not get done before lunch now because of this. I think what happened is the screen broke with so many words on the PowerPoint. It just the projector just could not handle it anymore. It's like this is more words than should ever be on a PowerPoint presentation. So it just quit. It just quit. And in all fairness, Red Pen says that's what I said. Too many words. Back at 12:30. Okay, so we're going to go to lunch. We're going to go to lunch. I'm by myself right now. The family's in Raleigh. So we're in, I guess it's part 19, is that right? Man. Okay, so we're going to be back at 12:20. Let's do that. Let's do 12:20. That'll give us 10 minutes before. Gives us almost 40 minutes, 45, 50 minutes in lunchtime. I can't do the math today. But hopefully IT can get everything sorted out. I know they've got an expert there in court. Utilize the man before he gets locked up, assuming that's what's going to happen. This is what he did. This is Paul's shtick. Get him on the clock, so to speak. Maybe we can give him some Greeners. Greeners was first in chat, but I'm going to pass him and go with Marianne R. instead. Congratulations. Greeners, we love you, man. We know you have cracked the code as to how you can get it first in chat. But I know that you're busy being a mod, and you just don't have time to also manage the internet. So, why was he on disability? We know that he got headaches during the day. I don't know what that's from. We also have heard that he was diabetic. He is diabetic, so I'm not sure what it was, but that's why I was first in chat with the not it. Not sure how. I mean, that's a good gig. If you can collect $230,000 a year in basically in benefits for not working and still work, because he was, right? They were still working. I'm not sure if he was doing it a full day, but he was really making some good money on that one and had a pretty good gig going. But apparently it wasn't enough because he still had to borrow from Paul. He was in a car crash in 2012. How do you get that much disability? Well, you pay for it, is the truth of the matter, just like with insurance. If you want to have a huge insurance payout, you have to pay huge premiums. And Paul managed it just in such a way that he got a huge unemployment check while still working. How can he make all that money and be on disability? $230,000 of it was disability money. He had 3 policies that allowed him to do that. Need a 3-hour video of RA talking about Bitcoin to help me sleep. JR, I'll see what I can do. We'll make it members only just for you. Where was the money going? Lots of different places, mostly out of his wallet and into other people's wallets. He was spending money quite quickly. He had expensive taste. He had a lot of debt, and also had well, I guess you could count this as debt. He had a side chick that needed a car as well. Josh says, "Can you pin my comment I already put in chat?" That's on the new one. Just 1 second. Let me go back to the new one, Josh. Okay, Marianne R. Just remember that Marianne R. won the internet. So I'll pin this. There we go. All right. With that, I'm going to go scrounge around in the kitchen, see if there's any food. I think I'm probably going to have cold cereal for lunch because I'm by myself. And that's what you do when you're by yourself at home. You just eat the easiest thing to make. So, I think it's going to be Captain Crunch with the berries. You wrote down who won? Oh, there it is. I got it. I'm not seeing it yet. Oh, it's in top chat. Hang on, live chat. I'm still not seeing it in the new one. You talking about this live one? This live? I'm so confused. You wrote it down. Okay, awesome. I've got you pinned anyway. All right, it's lunchtime. We're going to go to break, and I'll keep our eye out for any updates in the Nancy Guthrie case. So it seems like things are moving and shaking in that area. We might have some results. By results, I mean something bigger than arresting or stopping the wrong guy and letting him go again. So hopefully we're still praying for a good outcome there for the family. Tonight when you go home, please hug the people you love, smile at someone, make their day just a little bit better. And please stay safe till we go live again at 12:20 today.
Don't raise your voice.
You can join right now. Follow the portal to take you there. Grab a portal buddy, and you can continue the conversation there after lunch, and we'll start up. You won't miss a thing. We'll also get caught up completely. Won't be behind at all. You guys, we'll see you in just a little bit. Bye-bye.
I think I'm about to catch a whooping.
I don't like podiums, Your Honor.